Okay, good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It's Wednesday, October 25th. We are in the Pownell Elementary School cafeteria / gym. And everyone is here except Candy. She is out of town, so we knew she wouldn't be joining us tonight. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, in your packets, consideration and approval of minutes, consideration and approval of the minutes from the September 25th, 2017 and October 11th, 2017 as what?
25th September.
27th, sorry. September 27th, 2015. So, geez.
Those days.
This is what happens when you give me sugar before the meeting. September 27th, 2017, and October 11th, 2017, barring any errors or omissions in my reading of them. Sarah and Naomi, thank you. All those in favor? None opposed. Great. Adjustments to the agenda?
We would like to table policy KF until our next meeting. David Watts is unable to be with us, and so we'll do that policy next time.
Okay. Other than that, good to go?
Yes.
All right. So we will move on to good news and recognition. Report from the Freeport High School student government.
And tonight we do not have any, but I'll be reporting out about our board student reps during my superintendent's report.
Okay. So we will move on to good news from the Pownell Elementary School. Principal Demick.
Thank you, and thank you for coming out to Pownell. I always appreciate it that you take your show on the road. I thought for my share this evening, you might enjoy sort of hearing a little bit about the impact of the decisions that you made last year. We've had a phenomenal start with our shift to all-day K and pre-K, and so Kathy Hardy is here to tell you a little bit about how having an all-day K program has impacted her program. Is that on?
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to talk about full day K and good news about it. It has been good news. Bringing full day K to this community was truly a big change.
We might want her just to get a little closer to the mic, though, because I could hear you, Lisa, but I'm just so they can hear at home.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It was a big change for our community, and I started planning, okay, I'm going to have an additional afternoon to spend with these children. And I wanted to be sure that it was really something that would lift their learning, but I really wanted it to be age appropriate and developmentally appropriate for the students. So I started thinking about the programs we use and the models that we use with reading workshop and writing workshop and our everyday math. They really are designed for an hour lesson of each. And I certainly in half-day kindergarten did not have an hour for each of those. Wouldn't even be able to consider that. So I would always give a half hour, and then I would weave in some readiness, maybe at morning meeting, when they were all saying good morning to each other. My circle might look like there would be shapes in the middle of the circle, and someone would pick up a shape and say, good morning, Joe, this is a rectangle, just to kind of weave things in and out, or my message might have lessons in it. I will always be the kind of teacher that weaves things in and out of my day that we're talking about, but now I have a block that's given to me for writing and reading and math, and I'm seeing that the connection in that way is just so meaningful to the children and so relaxing to me. I'm not saying, oh, I'm sorry, we really have to put that away because we have to go to gym class and all of those things. So it's worked out very, very well. I really think an important part of kindergarten is watching the process. The product that they come home with is really not the piece that gives you information. It's watching the process and the way they manage themselves to come up with that product. So now I have time. I knew one of my goals was to be working with small groups. So I thought, well, I'm really going to teach into independence. so I can pull small groups. And so just to give you an idea of how that's working now that I have an afternoon to have a lesson like that, I did a little lesson on independence. And we sat and we talked about what does it mean to be independent. And then they were sent off to do a little lesson where they would take a whiteboard, a marker, and an eraser, and walk around the room, and they would write any words that they could read. And I just stepped back and took notes and watched, where are these children at during an independent time? Who's ready to take on this responsibility? Who isn't? And I just watched how so many children went to the name board that I have. They were writing their friends' names, some of which they may have known for 2 or 3 years. Others went to the name board, but they were writing the names and they were deciding if they should be in alphabetical order. Others went directly to the calendar section and where my morning meeting was. They knew they could find the month, the days of the week, things that they could read. Others went over and they went to the word wall. We had learned probably about 10 sight words that they could read automatically. They knew that was a sure thing. So they went over there and they started writing down these words in a list. And then some of my children in my class that I could see are ready to really handle the independence were in the library. They had already been looking through books and finding words that they had found previously during a book look time. That's the type of thing that I'm enjoying, that I have time to do. I'm giving this gift of time to do that. So that's kind of where I'm at in my thinking. One of the goals I wanted also was just to have a relaxed, I did feel like I was always getting them ready to move on. I would do a lot of the work. They would come back from gym and those writing books were out and ready to go. They never opened it, they never found a page, because I only had a limited time of 15 minutes. And if they set it all up, well, the 15 minutes is gone and then we're getting on the bus to go home. Now it's like they have such ownership in the classroom. They have set up parts of the classroom, and I really think the day is more meaningful to them. Were they always happy, joyful learning? Yes. But now we're extending their thinking. We're not layering on. I haven't added to the curriculum. I haven't said, now I taught you 10 words this morning. I have you this afternoon. I'm giving you 10 more. We're not doing that, but I'm giving them time to stretch their thinking, to practice, to revisit lessons, and I'm really excited about it. One thing they're feeling is part of the school. There's so much more of community members in our school. They celebrate celebrations with the rest of the school. We used to have, if there was an afternoon celebration, which was perfectly understandable, we weren't there in the afternoon very often, so would come Mrs. Demick with their little cart of hot chocolate saying, we'll have a private little celebration tomorrow morning. And we would, and it was wonderful. But now they're celebrating with the students that they're a part of the team with, that earned all those paws so that we could celebrate. One thing I'm noticing too is we have time to have buddies. So we've now connected with the 5th grade, and we're 5th grade buddies. So they've come down and they just showed the room the first day and played on the playground for 10 minutes. The next week, they went to the 5th grade and brought their writing folders, and both classes shared their writing with each other. We had a chance to visit them for the last 15 minutes of the afternoon the other day, watching robotics. And the 5th graders had chairs similar to this size, waiting in a circle. They were sitting. The minute the kindergartners walked in, they each ran to their partner, sat down, and watch the demonstration. It's just very, very empowering for them to walk through the school and feel like such a complete part of it. I think it's very important that there's coordination between the pre-K and the kindergarten. And I was a little nervous, to be honest, that I would lose that connection with looping from pre-K and having the children walk into kindergarten, because I knew them so well. I already knew their social behaviors, I knew their academic areas and what I needed to teach too. So I was thinking, this is going to be really different having a preschool teacher that's sending me children I really don't know much about. Well, I totally don't feel that way anymore. I already have come down to the lunchroom. I've met the children. I stop and have little chats in the hallway. I know all their names already in the pre-K class. So I think next year it is going to be a pretty nice transition. I'm looking forward to working with Sarah Mason and really sitting with her and learning from her. What teaching styles did you use to reach this group of children? And, let's collaborate on that. One thing that I do feel is so important in Pownell Elementary School is relationships. I think that relationships within our school has always been the heart of this school, and I want to keep their transition to kindergarten as seamless as possible. And I'm always also looking forward to their transition to first grade. I can't wait to talk to Mrs. Clark and hear how they doing, because we've really been working hard in kindergarten and having a lot of fun. They leave smiling. We just finished conferences. Parents said that some of them are tired when they get home. They're building that stamina. They love the rest and relax time. And they come in at 1:15 and it ends at 1 o'clock. But what they do is they quickly get their towels, they lay them out. September was music month. We just put on music. They just laid, and there wasn't any visiting. So I noticed the beginning of October, there was a little visiting happening. So I said, well, I think they're ready. Their stamina has been building. They didn't just lay quietly, so they're ready to have something out. So now I project a story up on the wall, and it's read to them with the words are lit up as the story is read to them. They lay for 15 minutes. They're getting extra read aloud, and they're resting their bodies, and it's really working out well. So all in all, I'm thrilled with Full Day K. Thank you for the opportunity to have me share some of my thoughts. Do you have any questions or anything you have any wonderings about it and how it's going?
I will say, it's a matter of perspective. I don't walk into a kindergarten room. You must have said relaxing 3 times. Wow. We have different senses of relaxing, but it's about what you've had and what you've got now. It's fantastic. So, any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, this is under the good news and recognition. I don't know if it's good news or not, but this is Beth Parker's last meeting as a RSU 5 board member. After 12 years on the board, she is not seeking re-election in the beginning of November. So we will have a new member to the board at our next meeting. But we just wanted to say thank you. Ginny gave me the statistic that you attended over 300 regularly scheduled board meetings over your time on the board. That doesn't count negotiations and subcommittees and everything else that you've done. You've been a fantastic vice chair and helped me a lot personally, and we will certainly miss you and wish you well and enjoying your Wednesday nights.
Here.
Did you prepare a speech?
No.
Okay.
But I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to all the people that have voted for me numerous times and showed their faith in me to do this job. It's been a very rewarding, I was like, I'll serve 1 term. Oh, I won't run again. Oh, well, okay, I can't, and I could never leave because I didn't feel that my job was finished. And in a way, sometimes I still think it's not finished, but I think it's about time for me to step down and let someone else take over.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your time. Public comment? Over at anybody has anything they want to share? Your husband's here. He might have something to say.
Thank you. You did a great job.
And he's out.
Hey, I'm out going. Can I leave?
No, you can't leave yet. I know, right? Okay, so we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Okay. So today...
Oh, wait, hold on, one more thing. In case anybody's curious about her name tag. We did not give her a new name tag today. This was apparently her name tag from the Freeport School Board. They used to have fancy name tags, and she swiped hers after their last meeting. And she was apparently the vice chair then, too. So it worked out. She broke it out for her last meeting. So.
And now we're trying to save money.
That's right. That's our fancy name.
So today, Cynthia and I were at the MSMA Fall Conference titled Public Schools Learning for Life. And this is today where the superintendents and assistant superintendents gather. And we heard from Dan Dominic. He's the executive director of the American Association of School Administrators, about the need for us to continue to advocate for public education. More than, I think they said, 90% of kids across the nation attend a public school. And we need to continue to advocate for that at both the district and the state level. And also there was a lot of discussion about multiple pathways today for our students. They're not going to all attend college, and we heard the statistics that only 40% of our students nationwide end up with a 4-year degree. And so it's really important for us not to forget about the trades and other areas where kids can earn a decent wage when they leave here. And he spoke about underwater welders get paid very well, and that doesn't require a 4-year degree. So a lot of discussion about that. We heard from a panel of stakeholders that included somebody from Great School Partnership, somebody there from the DOE. Betsy Webb spoke about the proficiency-based diploma and the importance that all of our students receive a diploma, and that's a big topic right now across the state, so that they can really see themselves as learners, and that the diploma is really, we need to remember, is a starting point and is a gateway to the future and not an end point. We heard about our students graduating today will have on average 14 careers in their lifetime, and so that really shows the importance of building, critical readers, good problem solvers. And tomorrow I think Jeremy and Michelle will be joining us for a lot of different workshops, and we should have a lot more learning from that. So that was a really good day today. Also included in your packet tonight is an orange sheet, which just is to give you kind of the latest update about the track and field from Rad Sports. And this is their timeline showing that they will complete the track and field by Veterans Day. At the same time, I'm compiling any cost that we're incurring past our agreed upon completion date of October the 13th, which would include like the additional cost for like Pat Carroll, Andrew Johnston, the clerk of the works, busing to Hunter Road for practices, potential costs or money we might have earned through ticket sales for postseason games. So I'm working with Craig on that. We're seeking legal advice about how we might recoup those costs, as well as the likelihood that we could collect the $1,000 per day in liquidated damages. We, as an RSU, have agreed to postpone the top coat for the track until next summer, and this will ensure that we'll be able to use the track and field next spring for our lacrosse, baseball, softball, and track. And at our next track and field meeting, which is on November 3rd, we're going to have a site walk, and the board has been invited to attend that meeting. We begin at 7:30 in the morning, most days. Sometimes we're waiting a few minutes for different people. And so anyway, if you'd like to join us,
It doesn't open till 7.
we encourage you to join us then, so that you can see where we are with the facility.
Is that meeting on the track itself, or where should people go at 7:30 if they want to go?
Good question, Lindsay. Go to the high school office. We'll meet there, and then we'll go from there.
November 3rd.
Yep.
A week from tomorrow. No, week from Friday. Sorry. Friday morning. It's a Friday.
So I'm also thrilled to report that we're going to have 2 student representatives joining us on the board. We had a 6-way race for the 2 positions, which is impressive that we have so many aspiring politicians. And I want to thank Clay Canterbury, Devin Garneau, Peter Noon, and Peter Sachs for running in this race, in addition to our two winners, who are Carter Jedry Irvin and Ben Monahan Moraine. Like father, like son, I think. So Ben and Carter will be alternating every other meeting as our board rep, and I think it's going to be a great addition to have these students on board, enriching our educational discussions. And they're both at play practice tonight. They're both in the play 9 to 5, or they would have been here with us. The School Spirit Challenge at the high school is going strong. They're raising money. It's a community service project that supports our children and families across the state that deal with food insecurity every day. That's going well. And I was able to be a part of that last week when it was all publicized, and it was just very energizing there. I also wanted to report that our math implementation of the Big Ideas program is going very well, and we also have hired 2 consultants from Everyday Math to do a needs assessment at our elementary level to strengthen our math instruction. And Cynthia, Amy Wheeler, our math strategist, and I had a good conversation with the consultants to identify our needed next steps in that area. So I really feel like we've got to push to improve our math scores pre-K through 12 now. So that feels really good. Fall sports are wrapping up, and I'm providing you with a handout showing how our teams did this season. And boys soccer is still in the running, and we'll be playing in the quarterfinals tomorrow at Yarmouth. And also our cross-country runners will be competing at the state meet on Saturday in Cumberland. Additionally, I'd like to report 2 resignations that have just come in recently. Megan Haley is an ed tech at Pownell Elementary School that will be leaving us, I think, for a teaching position. And then Brenda Anderson, our bus driver custodian at Pownell Elementary School, is resigning. We also have 1 retirement to report. Deborah Bartlett, the Durham STEM teacher, will be retiring at the end of this school year. And lastly, it is with much appreciation that I want to thank Beth Parker for her 12 years of service on both the Freeport and the RSU Board of Directors. She served the students of Freeport when she began. She saw us through consolidation and leaves us now advocating for all of our students in RSU 5 in Durham, Freeport, and Pownell. And I know that I have greatly appreciated your support this past year, and you'll truly be missed. So thank you. And that concludes my report.
She's way better at that than me. And my husband was an underwater bridge welder when he got out of the Navy.
There you go. All right.
So next is administrative reports. I think we're starting with finance with Michelle.
So I believe this is purple sheets. So I'll have to go back and forth here. So I'm going to report that we are doing very well so far. No hiccups going along the way, but I can also report that because of the savings of bringing in the Durham bus runs, we were able to buy a van that's needed for our homeless students. So thank you to the Finance Committee for approving that purchase. And I think you'll probably hear it in the notes from the Finance Committee as well. And also at the same time, we in HR, we kind of ran some numbers on how many applications we had during this past hiring season, and it ended up being somewhere in the neighborhood of 780. And so that was all done by hand. It was all hand scanned, all hand sent out via Google Docs. And so now we are actually, with the approval of the Finance Committee, purchasing a software that will help make this all digital. And so we're just in the implementation stages of that. We've got, it's called School Spring. It's a recruiting and hiring software. And we will be implementing it in January, I believe. We'll be getting all the principals on board and trained and And we're actually very excited because it should save a lot of hours of manual time. So, so those are the two big purchases that have happened, and the software wasn't all that big, thankfully, but very helpful. I don't think there's any positions open other than the two that we have of resignations, so those have been posted. And other than that, everything seems to be going much smoother this year. I am actually starting the budget already, so the principals will be getting their first drafts in about 3 weeks. And no, 2 weeks. Sorry, 2 weeks. I should know that. So that we can go through all of our budget meetings in December. So we look forward to giving you the superintendent's first draft in January. Any questions?
Questions? Yep. Jeremy?
Because my questions usually involve food of some sort. I've gotten very good reviews at home on the new nutrition plan and the meals and all that at lunch. Wonder if you've seen any increase in income from the school lunches yet, or if those numbers are in.
So we have seen participation rates go up, so therefore income has been increasing, yes.
Great, thank you.
Valley?
So Michelle, about the software that you guys bought for HR, where did the money come from to purchase that one?
So actually, Dennis is going to be talking a little bit about that. Just at that same point in time, we signed a contract to reduce our electricity rates.
So it's a swap, basically. Okay. And you said that you would be saving a lot of hours of work?
Yes.
So is there any savings in the labor, or you still needed to free up that time so that your staff could do other things?
That is correct. We needed the time to free up to do other things.
Okay.
So many things are being postponed because we don't have the hours to do it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else for Michelle? Thank you. Who's next? Cynthia. Gifted and talented presentation.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We're just going to wait for this to power up. You should have in your packet 8B2 that has the slide presentation that you're about to see. There's one, I think there's a page that was changed in there that goes along with it. You have that? Okay. And the change on that was just the addition of the high school data. Okay. Here we go. So what I'd like to do first is, like last time, I have a couple of guests that will be coming up to share a little bit of information in the middle about the middle of the presentation. We have two of our gifted and talented education teachers with us this evening. We have Chelsea Ray, and Chelsea is working both at Mass Landing School and Pownell Elementary School. And then we have Jerry Rosado, who's new to us this year. And Jerry is working at the Freeport Middle School as well as Durham Community School. So we'll get into a little more detail about that midway through our presentation. So GATE began before consolidation, just to follow the theme of the pre-K presentation. And then we expanded to include art and music in the 2015 and 16 school year. I should go back and just point out that these are also pictures that parents have given their approval, and this was a group of students from Freeport Middle School on an archaeology dig this fall. Okay, back here. And then you'll see this quote. It says, what it takes to teach gifted learners begins with the premise that each child should come to school to stretch and grow daily, and that's for all learners. And Carol Ann Thomason is an educator and is known for her work with differentiation. Here you'll see the same the same chart that you saw earlier, except that we're highlighting the acceleration piece from John Hattie's research. And you'll see that has a 0.8, well, you can look across in 2009 as a 0.88 effect size, and then it's maintained 0.68 throughout this current time. And then below that, toward the bottom, is the ability grouping, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go further. So in terms of acceleration, we do have some acceleration at the high school level. We also have some acceleration in some of our other areas as appropriately needed. Yes.
When you say acceleration, do you mean skipping a grade?
No. Oh, great question. So not skipping a grade. So if we have, for example, a student that is very accelerated in math, they may go into another level of class. So it's not skipping a grade in its entirety. It's an upper level. And at the high school, those pathways are examples of acceleration. Thanks for the question. And so this is what works. It's research for gifted students. And here again, you have the ability grouping and acceleration. And the review of the published research results found that most forms of ability grouping and academic acceleration succeed in addressing the needs of advanced learners without harming, and even helping the learning in other students. So we have identification process, and yesterday we went through this. We meet every trimester with our advisory group, and we went through this a little bit of this yesterday about our identification process. So for the academic portion, we formally identify students at the end of 3rd, 5th, and 8th grades. We use a universal screening form, so that universal form has indicators of what GATE students might look like, so the teachers will fill those out. We have a nomination form, and then we look at assessment data, for example, NWA data, MEA data, and the COGAP. That's a cognitive abilities test. And then we may include additional data. And then on the right side, you'll see art and music. So we also have a universal screening form and a nomination form. And then there's an artistic or musical task. And then for for art, we have a Torrance test of creativity. And the music is an audiation test where they listen to a piece for rhythm and tone, and they have to determine whether it's similar or different. And then there's the qualified students. So once they get to that point and they've qualified by the criteria, then they're asked to go on and create a portfolio. And if you have questions about that part,
actually, is there any way to make that larger? I can't read it here and I can't read it up there.
Okay. Can we have some help with that?
Check, please.
I know I could move that back and make it larger.
Thank you.
Not a problem.
Sorry about that.
So while we're having him do that, Jen asked a question earlier before the meeting started. Can you talk about what percentage of students we identify?
By law, it's 5%.
Thank you.
Welcome. And it's up to. It doesn't mean we have to. It's up to 5% of our student population.
So I'm sorry, can you explain what that means? You have to identify up to 5? No.
You don't have to identify, but you can only identify up to 5%.
Why is that?
So
what
if
does that mean, really?
Well, so what that really means, if we have 10% of our kids who might be gifted in another district, we can only identify up to 5%.
What's the rationale behind that?
What happens to the other kids? And who gets chosen out of that?
The highest 5?
Yes, it would be it's your highest 5%.
Yeah.
And
so there's a whole process after you look at all of the data. There's a team that looks at all the data and looks at each of the pieces and makes informed decisions. based on the data.
So do we accommodate the other folks who aren't part of that 5% in some way?
Yes, and I'll let
Great.
Chelsea speak to that. She's also our coordinator of the gifted and talented as well, our new coordinator this year. So here are our enrollment numbers on your sheet. I apologize, you have 3 through 5. Well, they're identified at the end of 3rd grade, so the numbers didn't change. It's just it says 4 through 5 in ELA, and the count is over to the right. And so that's the number across the district. We didn't want to be identifying, so we didn't put it by schools. We just used district numbers of the students who are identified. And it says right up above, see the 5% district-wide. And VPA is the visual and performing arts.
Have we historically been at that 5%, or?
I believe so. I know that the year before we were, before that I wasn't here, but, and you were new last year as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've always been around there.
Yeah.
I didn't hear, why did you change the 3 to a 4?
Because we identify at the end of 3rd grade, so they're actually not getting services. We do have a process where, all of the principals are aware of those students that are in the lower levels that, look like they're trending toward this, and so there's some enrichment that will happen, in certain time periods at the building level for 3rd graders. So we don't totally not service them, but they're not identified. So there they are. So Jerry Rosado, as I just introduced, and then Chelsea Ray, and then Terrence Hickey is at Durham School, and he also does the consultation at the high school, but he couldn't be with us tonight. So this is where I'm going to ask Chelsea Ray to come on up and talk to you about the programming.
So as you can see, the services for students in gifted and talented look different at each level and depending on the need of the students. So in grades K to 2, we use primarily a consult model that can happen through teachers, that can happen through principals, that can also happen through strategists. I've done some work with the math strategist at Mass Landing, who's then been working with Moore Street, so she and I might work together to then plan some enrichment models while she's over there working with the teachers. In grade 3, we do use more enrichment. So prior to last year, what I was told when I came on board last year was that they had previously been identified in 3rd grade, but what they were finding was that because there was so much time between 3rd and 5th, and because in 3rd grade the data was a lot squishier, it wasn't as clear cut who really needed the additional services. What ended up happening was that more students were identified, and then students were being unidentified in 5th grade, and there was just a lot of a lack of clarification. So the decision was made to move the formal identification to 4th grade, but so with that we didn't want to completely drop that 3rd grade service, so we do provide additional enrichment in 3rd grade to sort of make up for that. In 4th grade, we provide push-in and pull-out services in both ELA and math. So that might look like going into a classroom and supporting students with what students are, with what the teacher is doing in the classroom, but elevating the level that that we're asking the students to work at. In 5th grade, we continue to use the pull-out model in ELA. So, we might work with a small group of identified students on enrichment and extension projects. In math, we've moved this year to a cluster model with flexible grouping. So students are clustered in a particular class, and then that has enabled us to provide additional time in that class. So I am in a 5th grade classroom daily for math, which enables me to provide more support for those students. We do use flexible grouping, so it is something where we'll pre-assess students, and then I will work with a lot of the gifted students regularly because, on the pre-assessment, they really are showing knowledge of the entire unit prior to that having even been taught. So I'm then looking at the content and finding ways to go deeper with that content. The flexible grouping does enable us to look at the pre-assessments of other students and say there might be another student who has demonstrated mastery of a particular skill that we might be able to pull in, on a day or two when they've demonstrated they know what's being taught that day. In sixth grade, for ELA, we are continuing to use that push in and pull out model with some co-planning and co-teaching, and the math has also moved to the cluster grouping model with flexible grouping. So Jerry is in multiple classes with that co-teaching model. In 7th and 8th grade, we do some pull-out in ELA, and we do a lot of consulting and co-planning long-term. So here's what students are going to be working on the next unit, and how can we make that more challenging for the students that need a little bit of an extra push. And 7th and 8th grade is when they do start that advanced academic pathway, the polynomials class. And then in the high school, we moved to more of a consultation model with the academic pathways, where students are following a pathway that's appropriate for them and their learning and what they're prepared for. And we work with guidance in terms of placement for classes and things like that. And then in art and music, the art and music services look really different depending on the student needs and the student population. We have some schools where there might be 1 or 2 or 3 identified students, and we might have some schools where there are a much larger number of identified students. It also depends on whether students are, for music, if students are in vocal performance or if they're playing an instrument. So it really is individualized to the student. The stipend positions in the schools have really allowed us to make sure that we have professionals who are qualified as art and music teachers providing these services, so that they really are able to make sure that they're providing good quality instruction in these subject areas, so that we're not just providing more enrichment where students are just doing something that's a little bit more fun. It is they're working with an artist, they're working with the music teacher to really hone their craft and improve the information, the products that they're able to produce and get more individualized attention. So,
any questions about the programming, Sarah?
Just getting back to the 5%, and I'm sorry, I just don't quite understand the process. Are kids assessed every year, or what is the process for them to become part of this program? And do kids come out of it and go into it, and I'm just trying to figure out, in a given year you have your quota, but then a kid might rise to the level of gifted, but is there room for him to enter into, or her into that? So I'm just curious how that works.
So yes, so we formally identify in 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade. So in 5th, for example, in 5th grade, we will rescreen students to determine if they do continue to qualify for services. It is rare, but it does happen, where a student might no longer qualify for services. In those cases, we do make a note of that student, make sure that gifted and talented teachers are aware that that student has received services in the past, so that if they were doing something where they could include some more students, or if there was a particular area that student might be able to be included in, they will. We look at, hold on, sorry, I'm trying to remember all of the different parts of your question. We use the cognitive abilities test. So that's kind of one of our major indicators in terms of identification. If we do have a student who is outside of those years, and we have some compelling data, NWA and MEA, or a teacher or parent who feels strongly, we will, with a nomination form, we will take a look at that student. We actually had that happen with a couple of students last year who were screened, and we did put a student who was outside of those years, but who demonstrated that they did qualify. Then we will. It is frequently, we're hovering right at about that 5%, but it's not frequently the exact number. So if we have a student that is demonstrating that they are performing at the same level as the other gifted and talented students, then we will absolutely accommodate that. It's not sort of a matter of, that there is not a single, space left. It's more, does their data reflect what the students who were identified last year, are we comparing apples to apples? Yeah.
So to follow up with Sarah's, sorry, was anyone going to go? No? Okay. Have you ever seen cases of students who would qualify, but because it's only 5%, they don't make the cutoff, but their NWAs, MEAs, COGAT, or whatever else you are assessing with demonstrates that they ought to be included, but because it's only 5%, they're not allowed to?
So, and I personally have never seen a case where a student clearly qualifies for services and is not able to. More frequently, what sometimes might happen is that if we have a much smaller number that are clearly qualifying, then we end up with a large number of students who are on the border, and that's when we sort of as a team look and we make that decision. So there might be a student who who is hovering right around that border, and on one year they might qualify, but in another year they might not because of that border. However, it's never a case where a student is clearly really needs these services and is not being identified, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. Now, in the eventuality that there were more than 5% of students who actually do clearly qualify, will we have an option to service more than 5%? I mean, what would the state do if we decided that these kids all need the services and it's more than 5% of the student population?
I'm not quite sure how the state would handle that. I do know that from courses I took and from talking to the people who review the state plans, I remember speaking with her once, and she sort of said, if it pops up to 6 for a year and comes back, and it's right around there, we're not there, that it's not going to be the end of the world, but they're more concerned about if it's 6 and then 7 and then 8, and then we're sort of expanding this to cover students that it wasn't really intended to cover.
So was the 5% an arbitrary number, or what is it based on?
So I believe what it's based on, and kind of going back to my classes that I took a couple years ago, when you're looking at sort of the bell curve and the students that are really, it's designed to be for students that are 2 standard deviations above where the average student would be for that. And that's about, the numbers wise, you're looking at about 2.5%. So they went with 5 so that we would have that room to cover if there was more in a particular area or not. With gifted students, it's not, a lot of times people think, oh, it's the advanced kids that are doing really well and working hard, and that's, with gifted students, there's a different thought process. It's very clearly different than other students, and it's sometimes I think a little bit more profound than some people realize.
So what you're saying is that 5% ought to accommodate,
exactly,
with plenty of room, all the students who should be receiving services or would be qualified to receive services.
Yep.
Okay, it's good to know that if there are more on a year, we can still take them. Yeah.
Do they do, I know the visual and performing arts is its own thing, but ELA and math, do you identify individually? Could it be 5% in ELA and 5% in math? Do they tend to be your ELA and math? There are a number of students who are identified in both areas. There are also some students who are identified in one particular area or the other. How does the percentage work? Total?
The percentage overall of students who are ELA versus math?
Yeah. No. I'm saying the 5%.
Yes.
So if you're in both, do you take up 2 slots?
No.
Okay. Just curious.
I do know that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about, for the push-ins, the pull-outs, is there an established GATE curriculum that teachers are accessing for guidance on lessons, exercises, materials, assignments, or is that like your job is to invent the curriculum for each student? Like, how does that work?
So there is not an established curriculum that currently exists, but we use a lot of the curricula that students are currently using in the classroom, and then we will modify it for, so, you know, I might look at a unit that students are doing in the classroom and find a way, and say, you know, okay, these couple of things in this unit, here's a way that I can make them a little bit deeper. We can go a little bit further with it. And then I will also use some outside resources that I learned about when I moved to the district that had been used prior, and that we feel really kind of push student thinking.
Have you ever in your coursework or other jobs encountered such a thing, like a GATE curriculum for language arts that has, or in math, like that has things laid out? Does that exist, or is that not really available?
I do know about some specific, some programs that exist. I don't have any experience with any of them, so I can't really speak to how comprehensive they are or sort of how they work. I do know that there are some curricula out there particularly designed for gifted and talented students.
Okay, thanks.
But generally, isn't it something that you generally have to form yourselves, because each student, as you said, you know, they're profoundly different in certain ways. So each student is different, and there's got to be different ways to push them.
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
Not just a cookie cutter.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Maybe that's the rationale behind the 5%. Imagine trying to do individual curriculums for 10% of the population. Kate.
I just have a question about when it was on the previous slide, the programming, and when you do the consultations and the enrichment and the push in and pull out groups, what is the communication to parents? Is there any about whether or not their child is getting enrichment, or especially in the lower grades before they're identified?
So before they're identified, it's really on an as-needed basis in working with the teacher. So there's not a whole lot of communication with the parents specifically. Sometimes I might work with a couple of students, but also it'll be working with a teacher, and a teacher saying, oh, you know, hey, you know, this student is working on this, you know, what are some things that I could do to push that student? So a lot of it is behind the scenes, so it's not something that would be necessarily communicated to a parent, and you know, that's in the third grade when I am working more directly with students. That is the same, because the students that I am working with are change and are flexible and are dependent on what the teacher needs and what the teacher feels like I should be doing. So it's more of a teacher. It's once they're identified that then I'm looking at, okay, what are these individual students' needs?
So once they're identified, then there is more parent contact.
Yes.
Valerie.
Yeah.
I have two questions. One is to follow up with Kate's inquiry about the third grade and K through 2. Do you consult exclusively with the teachers, right? So you're not in the classrooms, K
Correct.
through third. So how often do you get a request for consult from K through T teachers?
So from third grade, more. So third grade is different than second. So second grade, not that frequently. I went to Moore Street a couple of times last year. Like I said, I also do a little bit more. So this year, I did a little bit more with working with a strategist. So she was planning. She and I met to plan some math enrichment opportunities for those students, and then she was the one who was traveling over there because she doesn't see students, so she could meet with teachers more frequently. And in third grade, I do work with students and with teachers.
Okay. So is it well known among K through 2 teachers that you are a resource to them, so that they can access you? And they don't call you because they are differentiating themselves, or they don't know that you're there to help?
So last year I went to both a first grade and a second grade PLC and introduced myself. I have done a little bit more of speaking with Julie and sort of talking with her about that if there is a student that someone is struggling to meet the needs of, and they bring that student to, an SAT meeting where they're looking at what these students' needs are, then Julie will kind of bring me in, in that specific instance. So that's kind of how she and I have sort of modeled it, so that if there is a specific need, then we'll meet that need when it arises.
Okay, thanks. And the other question was about the co-teaching model in math for 5th and 6th. How often are you pulling in kids who are not identified into the cluster?
It definitely happens. It is not something that so thus far, I mean, we're 2 months in, and I believe so far, it's been a handful of lessons, maybe 7 or 8, and it's only during lessons when we have a pre-assessment data that has demonstrated that they've mastered the content, and so we want to make sure that they're not just repeating something that they already know how to do on that day.
Okay, so in essence, there isn't that much mixing and going on between the GT identified kids and the other kids in the classroom.
Well, I guess it depends on how the particular day. The classroom that I'm currently in, we are using a workshop model, and so there are some components of the class where they're a little bit more intermingled, and then other components where they're working with me.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Can I ask one question on the polynomials? I'm not sure who it's for, but so that's the new position that we added last year. That's
Correct.
A section in Durham and a section in Freeport Middle.
We had the position for 8th grade prior to, and so now it's the 7th and 8th grade in Durham as well as Freeport Middle School.
But that's not strictly for GT.
No, it's not. It includes other students that.
But it does require
through a criteria.
Right, criteria.
Yes.
And not anybody can just take the class.
Correct. There's a criteria.
But you don't
process.
have to be identified in order
Correct.
to potentially get into that class.
That's correct.
Okay.
Be a very small class. Okay, so let's see, we'll forward. So on this slide, you see the assessment data for gate identified students, and the NWEA is showing you if they've met their growth targets, and that's the percentage of the gate identified students in either math or ELA that met their identified growth targets. And then underneath is the MEA, and the percentage you're seeing for MEA is not just it's not proficient, it's at above state standards. So if I look across the MEA, all but one gate either student in either ELA or math in every grade level was proficient, but these are the ones that were at above state standards in that area, and that's what we would expect. That's one of the things when they're identified. They're one of the data points that we look at is, are they at above state standards on the MEA. That's one piece that we look at. And I added on here the SAT, which is for 11th grade. So these are current seniors. So all of the seniors that are identified in math, 100% of them were at above state standards, which is like the 96th or 7th percentile that they scored, and then ELA as well. So the MEA I would expect to be higher than the NWEA because the instruction for GATE is at a deeper level, as Chelsea was saying, and with the NWEA, it's really more surface, and it goes like, I think, the grade level above it. So, and you have to remember too that 50%, if you look at the NWEA, is where it's expected, but the growth targets are beyond the 50th percent, which was what was expected. I also want to point out that if you look at the 9th and 10th grade for math and ELA, the reason that those percentages on the NWEA are so low is because half of the math identified GATE students, and we talked about this back in January, did not take the test. And a little more than half of the GATE identified students for ELA did not take the test. That's why those numbers, those percentages are so low.
Because they get included in the total number of kids who took, like, so if we have 4 kids and only one of them took the test, the best we could get is a 25? Or did they do it based out of the number that take it?
I just took the kids, the identified students, and I looked at how many of them met their growth target. And when I looked at all of the students, there were several of them that had no scores at all because they didn't take the test.
So they qualified as not meeting their growth target, or they got pulled from the total?
I included them in there.
Okay, so
yes,
so that
yes.
was my okay.
Yeah, that was your question. Yeah, I included them in there because I don't want to say that, you know, if I only use the ones that took it, if I said 100%, that's really not reflective of our total population of GATE students. So I wanted to point that out so that because we talked about this before, that they didn't take it.
It's tough because you penalize yourself, because in theory they very likely probably would have met their target, but we assume they didn't because they didn't take it.
Right, and that's why I mentioned it.
Thank you for
yes, you're welcome.
Do you have the numbers for the ones who did take them without the ones who didn't?
I can get that for you.
Yeah,
I should have done that. Yeah, but they were. Yeah, I'll have to get that. I'll have to dig into that. And
okay.
Yeah, I can pull that out for you pretty easily.
Jen.
So if the NWEA is one of the ways that you identify a GATE student, if they choose not to take the NWEA, what's
so this is only happening in 10th grade. So they're identified in 3, 5, and 8.
Right. So do they stop getting services in high school if they don't take the NWEA?
Mm-mm. No.
So once you've been identified in 8th grade, you're good through high school?
Correct.
Regardless of whether you take the test?
Correct.
Lindsay.
Can you define what the NWA growth target means?
So the growth so if you're assessed in the fall, they are looking at norms of they look at the 2015 was the last time they normed the assessment, and we're going to have more in-depth conversation about assessments coming up. But so they look at if you scored X on this assessment, your projected growth will be 9 additional points or 8 additional points based on other students across the country who took that same assessment and started with that same score. That's generally how that works.
I'm having trouble processing this because these numbers seem shockingly low to me, but I don't know if I'm conceptualizing what you're saying correctly.
Yeah, they do.
So like,
yeah.
take the first column, 4 to 5 math students.
Correct.
58% of those students are growing as one would expect a GATE student to grow.
So let's just
based on national.
Right, that's correct.
Well, I would say, just to interject, not that a GATE student is expected to grow, as any student that scores at that level is expected to grow. So when NWEA is norming it, they're not like separating out the gifted and talented.
Correct. And they may have say their goal. That's correct. And say their goal. Say they were expected to grow 9. They may have grown 8, which means they made great growth, but they didn't meet what the expected growth target was based on the norms that were given in 2015. So that's why I put a little bit more weight on the MEA for this particular slide.
Have you looked at this same data for non-GATE students?
I don't have that data in my head at this point, but I can get you that data.
Be an interesting comparison to see if.
Yes.
So remember, it's in your district scorecard.
Oh, it's in there. So the same, like I can compare apples.
The
to
total
apples.
versus the total, and then extrapolate those. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll take a look at that. Thanks.
But for NWAA, you can't really do that comparison, can you? Because not everybody's starting at the same point in the fall.
It's wherever they started.
Yeah.
Right.
So if NWAA is like a tricky one, really.
It is.
To do that apples to apples. It's not apples to apples.
And this is not unusual data either. I think you've done it in.
You could have somebody in the fall score like where they should be in the spring. And then when they test in the spring, it's showing like
so that's
zero
achievement
growth.
data versus growth data, right?
Right.
So they might already be at the level where you're expecting at the end of that grade, but this is about wherever you are at the start and how much you grew.
Right, but I mean, if they start high, their growth might not be along the same curve as somebody else that's
But if they
a
start
student.
high,
but it's
then the
based on the
growth
norm.
target is smaller.
Right, I was going to
They
say, generally,
recognize
the higher
that
you are,
the
your
higher
target
you
isn't
start, the less room to
It might
go
be
you
3
have,
points
so they
versus
give you a
9.
smaller growth target. So it's actually really well done.
Okay.
And you would expect every student to grow and meet their target. I mean, that's what we shoot for, right?
Right.
Well,
So
Well, then these numbers are not very good if we're expecting everybody to meet their target.
Okay, so I just want to interject because I can't help
Are we
myself.
doing our assessment discussion?
Well, we are doing our assessment discussion, but it's like we're pre-teaching for that, so that's okay. That's good. That's best practices. So the NWEA, and Cynthia, correct me if you think I'm wrong, it does put out growth targets, but they'll tell you that because they norm it, that you really are looking to have 50 to 60%, depending on your socio-demographic, meet their growth target. So you can compare it. It is apples to apples. If you look at the district scorecard, you can say, how are our gifted students doing in comparison to the rest of the students in RSU 5. But I think when you're looking at a target like 58% and you're going, ooh, that looks terrible, you have to remember that the NWEA would say you're really looking for 50 to 60% of your kids to hit that target because of the way they do their numbers. So
and even between 40
don't
to
think
60.
of, now, do we want all kids to meet their targeted growth, right? And we are, those numbers are in comparison to kids who are taking the NWEA in an urban school. So that's why I would think that we would always be up towards 60% or higher. But yes, we will get into more detail in our assessment workshop.
Okay.
Yes.
But for NWEA, if it's looking at the full student body across the country, but for GATE students, they're your top performers, and you wouldn't expect them to meet their growth targets. They wouldn't be in that 50%.
I would really hope that our GATE students are meeting their growth target. Now, saying that, it shows how important it is to differentiate appropriately. It kind of goes back to that very first slide with that very first quote that we want all of our kids to be stretching and growing daily, right? So these are our brightest students, and so yes, I would hope that their stats might be a little higher. Now, it also shows the importance for professional development with our teachers so that they really understand the standards beyond their grade level. Because if you don't understand that, then it's hard to teach to a student that's beyond that typical grade level.
It's interesting. When I read this, I read it a little bit differently. I look at 4-5, right, which those, other than the high school, because that's skewed by the number of people who took it, right? So if we look at 4-5 and we look at 6-8, we identify at the end of 3, right? So 4 is sort of the beginning of where they're getting any of these services. And I mean, 6-8 is a huge improvement over 4-5. So to me, what that's saying is like, I think we're doing a good job. Once we're delivering those services, we're helping those kids get to the point where they're meeting their growth targets at a much higher rate. I mean,
well, I have to disagree. I would expect 100% of GATE students would meet the growth target. They're your top performing
I love that you're
students.
aiming high. I love that. Yes, I'm with you. Yeah. But I would agree with Michelle too, that where you could see that our kids are more of them are meeting it as they go up. That's what our current data is showing us.
But also, isn't it and I may be wrong, on NWEA, it's testing, generally what we're learning in this area. But if you're giving enrichment to gifted students and enriching in certain areas, you may not be enriching in the certain area that they're testing on?
Yeah, the NWA is like a survey, and it kind of just it hops around, where this is really based, the MEA is based on, what you're expected to learn that year, and we're going deeper in instruction, and so that makes sense that those are higher to me.
Yeah, to me, we're looking at our top tier of students, 90 and 88 and 93% are above the state standard. Like, that makes sense to me.
That's not just at state standard, that's above.
Right.
Yeah. So that 79% would be higher if I just said proficient, right? Because remember, they're all proficient with one exception in that bottom.
On the NWEA.
Okay. Yeah.
But my point is that I feel like if that number's not 100%, then we're not
right.
Extending them the way they need to be extended.
I have to keep saying that if NWEA was here, they would say that the way they norm, they don't expect you to hit 100% on that test.
Yeah. When all students are considered in that statistic.
Okay.
What I'm saying is these
Okay.
are your top performing students that should be in the 50% that meet the growth target.
Well, one possible explanation is that they're not challenged enough. That's what you're saying. It's tricky because we have 3 gate teachers through the whole district. So I think to get 100% scores in here, I think would need to have full-time gate classes, that are engaging them at their curiosity and capacity level throughout the entire day. But we're pushing in, we're pulling out, we're not structured to do that currently. I think it's something we can explore. Like, are there ways we could creatively reimagine our program so that these students really are being pulled up instead of asking for more challenge? They're being put in a pool of more challenge that they're learning to swim in. I think it's a volume of challenge or something like that. I don't know.
I just think you have to remember that this is one test on any given day. You're dealing with kids. So to expect 100% on a random day of a child where, there's so many factors. I just think that it's really unrealistic to think that we're going to get that. Not saying that they could attain that, but that doesn't mean on that day they're going to display it. If they had a bad bus ride or something, that's going to affect what happens on that test. So there's so many factors that are going to make it, I think, impossible to get that level.
And I guess I really appreciate you saying that, because we're looking at, on this NWEA data, one day, right? So this is not, I guess it would be more worrisome to me if it was 3 years worth of data that looked like the 27% or the 48, right? So this is just one snapshot, and I think we've talked about that we have to be cautious about that, and we want to wait till we really have some trends over time.
Right. Sarah?
Thank you. Do we know what other programs in the area look like? Is our program much the same as everyone else's in the state or
in terms
around us?
Of what we're delivering, or in terms of our
Yeah, having 3 gate teachers, or does it look more like an immersion in a class versus assistants?
I think they vary. I mean, some programs it's differentiation in the classroom by the classroom teacher, so that's on one end of the spectrum. And I think people are playing with different models. We've just started our cluster model, so I think we'll wait and see what that data looks like. The other thing I want to say, and I debated whether to even go there, but we know the students behind the numbers, and there are. With small numbers, sometimes there's circumstances that factor in. I'll just say it that way. So, just to protect, But to answer your question, Sarah, there are vast differences from district to district.
Does it take a certain threshold, a certain volume, a certain number of students to really justify having full classes with gifted and talented students versus what we're doing now?
I don't know of a district that has full classes in GT at all.
Unfortunately, you're back to that 5%, right? If you figure and you break it up across grades, it's only a couple of
you
grades.
want them with their peers and.
Right.
I wanted to talk to two things, and one thing was about this area. Like, I've been involved with the GATE for a very long time in this district, and I've been involved in hiring gifted teachers, gifted coordinators and stuff, and even though this is a state law, it's amazing how many people would come and say, I'm a gifted teacher, or I coordinate the gifted in this school district or that, and we say, okay, so what do? We don't do anything. And there's good
coordination.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, there is such a wide range of what school districts do, or the people that I have interviewed and talked to, it's a huge range. Even though they're supposed to be doing this or that, they don't. They're like, yeah, we don't have the money, we don't have the time, we don't have whatever, so we're not doing it. So, and what the people that were doing things, what they do, it's all different, because when you're dealing with gifted students, you're dealing with all different kinds of students. You have twice exceptional kids, and gifted kids that are all different. So you always have to, if you want to give them their best education, you have to change it up for each of the kids. But it still doesn't always work. You can have a gifted kid that you can give them everything they need, and they're like, yeah, I'm not going to take that test though, and they don't care. There are some kids that, it's not their goal to get the best score. I've had very close contact with some gifted kids. They're like, yeah, if I want to get a good grade, I have to write, another paragraph here, but I don't want to do it. So they won't do it. So that's what happens sometimes on your testing is, they're not really trying because it's just not something that they want to do.
Matters to them.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to them.
That is all true. And so I second all that, but I also want to go back to Lindsay's point about how do we deliver the services and what is the best way. And Lindsay is right. I mean, if you look at the 4th grade, those kids get 1 hour of ELA and 1 hour of math per week. The rest of the week, they're in the classroom doing what everybody else is doing. So I just want to put a plug in for just making a huge effort to differentiate in the classroom and teach. I mean, make sure the teachers know how to do it, because 95% of the time or more, these kids are not with the GT teachers who do a fantastic job, but they have very little contact with the students. They don't have the time. They have a lot of students, 6 schools. So really where the effort needs to be, I think, supported is not just the GT program, but also just differentiation for all the students, including the G students in the classroom. And this is something we've been just looking and trying to figure out for the last few years, but I'm hoping that that's the focus, because that's where it really needs to be, in addition to GT and everything else we do.
So I think that's a nice segue to the next slide, if that's okay. So this year, as you know, we just started our math clustering, and I think you heard from Chelsea that they've already made some changes in, we really need to do a lot of pre-assessment, and they're planning a unit ahead now, and we've had some adjustments with some schedules so that all of the GT or GATE teachers have planning time to discuss it with the classroom teachers. So we had originally at Math Committee last spring talked about doing it 4, 5, 6, and then the decision was made through much discussion that we would start at 5, 6, and so I think that we may be looking to move it down to grade 4. I think we talked about that a little bit yesterday, and then we talked about the polynomials class already. And then for professional development, our next steps, I think you heard from Dr. Foley earlier about how we had math consultants come in for everyday math, and that was at the end or the 3rd week of September. They spent 2 days with us. They traveled throughout the district and did observations in just about every K-5 classroom, looking to gather some information. We had 2 focus group meetings. One was K2, one was 3-5. So we had teachers from across the district meet with the consultants without any administration. They had previously all K-5 teachers had been given a survey which had wonderful questions, and they submitted that so that the consultants had that ahead of time. So they used the results from the survey as talking points, and they felt that they had very candid conversation about what are the needs, what professional development needs do we have, what they thought about the program. And so we just recently received the report back this week. And I think Dr. Foley was saying that Amy Wheeler, who is our math strategist, and Dr. Foley and I consulted for a little over an hour with the 2 math people, and they gave us some recommendations, and we really talked those through. And on our November 9th PLD day, Ellen, one of the consultants, will be coming out and working with Amy and doing some professional development based on our recommendations, not only of the Everyday Math program, but of mathematical practices. So I feel like we're really positioned well, to do that work. And throughout the year, every professional development day we're looking at, and the release day, to continue the professional development in math. So at the pre-K through 5 level. So we will be constructing an agenda jointly, and so that will be happening on the 9th. And the professional development for the big ideas, we have a consultant coming out who was a math. He not only works for Big Ideas, but he was a middle school teacher for 12 years, and a high school math teacher for 8 years. Very versed in math and mathematical practices. He will be coming out on November 8th to do some observations in the middle school and high school classrooms, and using some of that information to inform his professional development for the next day for our middle school and high school teachers. And Nate Garnett, who is our math strategist at that level, will be working along with him. So both coaches will be working along with the consultants. So I feel very positive about where we're headed in our professional development, and it's systemic, and pre-K through high school. And then of course we're going to keep looking at data, so seeing trends over time, and we're watching that needle go up. That's the goal.
Does the Big Ideas curriculum, does the whole program have sort of, extended learning options that you can pull from?
Both programs have differentiation, and in fact, one of the things that I believe the teachers at this is Everyday Math, but the teachers talked about is they want more professional development with differentiation, and so that there's going to be a focus on how to do that, and where is that, and Connect Ed, that's involved, and what were the changes. I think one of the issues was, or one of the things that was talked about was, we moved to the revised version because we had everyday math before, but there were lots of revisions that really needed professional development. It wasn't just, okay, we're taking out the extra stuff that's not Common Core related. There was a lot of other revisions, and they're going to be talking about the virtual learning community and Connect Ed and how you can use that. There's so many tools available, but it's taking the time to delve into them, and we will provide the teachers during that professional development day with some time to do that. Where at the beginning, more of the beginning stages about what, in terms of big ideas, what that program, how to navigate that whole program. So we're earlier in the stages with big ideas, but the differentiation is part of that.
And I think, to Valley's point, that's going to be the key, right? I mean, we don't have enough staff, the state doesn't allow it. I mean, but it's a continuum. It's not gifted and talented and everybody else, right?
Correct.
I mean, there's kids all along that continuum, and that ability to differentiate every teacher in every classroom to a degree anyway, I think is going to be key.
And I think we've invested heavily in this district in literacy with the Teachers College and the workshop model. We've done professional development with strategy groups, so I think we're really poised to reach each of the learners in language arts, and I think we need to do the same with math.
That's a nice positive way of looking at that. I hadn't thought about that. That we have been really investing in those differentiated programs and getting all these new curriculums. I kind of forgot that we did all that. So thanks for the reminder. And it's a nice positive explanation saying we're doing better in reading rather than, we're lagging in math. It's like, oh, okay, well, we know we're doing better because we intended to do better in reading, and now we're intending to do better in math, so it's great.
Even in the focus groups, the teachers talked about how much they've had in ELA, and they would love, they're craving it in the math.
Yeah. Can I make a couple comments? One thing is that I feel that social engagement is really important for the GATE kids. It's like a common symptom of their the way that their minds work is that they can be isolated because, well, they are an extreme minority just as it is, but then they can be different in so many ways. So I'm not exactly I don't have understand exactly how the clustering thing is working, but from the sounds of it, I think it's a movement in the right direction to help these kids, have each other whenever possible. And whereas just to help them forge those relationships through time, I think is a beneficial thing. Also, I wanted to float a pretty radical idea and get some people's ideas about it. I think that the name Gifted and Talented is it works against so much of how we're trying to look at brain development. Our brains are plastic, and the term gifted and talented, on the face of it, sounds like you're born with it. And it keeps bugging me year after year, and I thought, well, I'm gonna bring it up here as a topic of conversation. I talked to one of our legislators at the state level, how do you go about even exploring this? And he said, begin to talk to people. So I'm going to raise that here. And then I can easily write a letter, after having gotten some feedback from people who work in this day in and day out. Write a letter and start the ball rolling, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. It's offensive to people who aren't in the program. It doesn't work for people who are in the program because you don't want them thinking that they're born one way or the other. So, and they don't, you're just gifted at something. And then it's like the name itself contributes to some of the bad feelings that can happen, like a sort of jealousy, oh, well, they don't have to work as hard because they're just smart, or all the stuff that flies around emotionally. So I think that just a quick brainstorm for better names could be an enrichment program, a challenge program, advanced program, any of those, I think would be worlds better. So I hope to continue talking to you all, our staff, community members, to contribute to my understanding of how people feel, so when I write my letter, I'm informed. Thank you.
I would love to hear, when you guys have a group meeting and if that could be one of the things on your agenda to just talk about. When I was in school, it was called Alert. That's what, I don't know why.
What
I
was
think it
is
meant
an
something.
acronym for something?
Maybe it did. I was in the program, thank you very much. I just didn't know what it meant.
So Lindsay, I want
Obviously, it was a
to
higher percentage,
sign your letter, and I also want to let you know that this topic of the name has come up numerous times in the advisory group. It's just the state-given legal name, but we call it GATE because we don't really want to call it gifted and talented. So there are all kinds of acronyms and little other things that we use for the program because we feel the way you do.
And I heard them actually, I heard one of them correct. They said GT, I mean GATE.
Agreed. I would sign your letter, absolutely.
Okay, Dennis is ready to move on to capital improvement plan. We are shifting gears radically here, folks. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
First, I want to thank Naomi and John and Tim Giddings for coming along on the tours and supporting the facilities planning, and the board for supporting facilities so as well as you guys do. Do a great job. I'm going to start with this past year, what we've completed over the summer or over the school year.
Can we start with the picture you have on the screen? Because that is a real picture of what the field looks like right now. That is in there.
The field is actually, the field turf itself is actually finished completely.
Yeah.
The crumb rubber is in. The track isn't
It's not
quite
crumb
finished
rubber,
yet.
let's be clear.
Meaning the Nike grind, right?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you.
Wow. First sentence. Nike grind is in, and
Thank you.
it's beautiful. It really is. Every line you can imagine is in there. So I'm going to go over what we've done, what we've completed this year. We're still working on a few items, but we had 8 additional buses added to the fleet. This was a big surprise. The transportation company that was doing the transportation for the Durham area decided they weren't going to be contracting through us anymore. So we found it necessary to purchase 8 buses, 6 of them which we use in our Durham town. The state recommended average for a school bus is 10-year replacement cycle or 100,000 miles. We purchased 2 buses to replace aging buses in the fleet, bus 23 and 24. And the other 6, like I said, went to Durham, formerly contracted through Beaumont Transportation. We replaced 2 boilers at Mass Landing School. These boilers were replaced they were at the end of their life cycle. They both leaked and had been repaired many times. We encountered no problems with this job at all. It's complete. The boilers are up and running. Although the temperature says we're saving money every day. Moore Street School, we converted boiler number 2 to natural gas. We hadn't done that. We were just on oil. We haven't purchased oil in a long time. Natural gas is really working out for us. The dual fuel for boiler 2 allows for redundancy in the event of a failure of boiler 1. If we hadn't done this, we would have been buying oil in a hurry to run it. And I think we still maintain the ability to run oil either way. It's just we can run either for boiler 2 now. In the process, boiler 1 leaked. We went to the finance committee. We needed to change 2 boiler sections. It was a big surprise. It was addition to the changeover to natural gas for boiler 2. Leaks were discovered when we fired it and tested it in early September. The finance committee approved funding on 9/27 at the finance committee meeting for these repairs using major maintenance and school transportation, contracted transportation services. That's the Beaumont money. we were able to hire 5 of the Bomar drivers out of the 6. So we were really lucky in that respect. So Durham heat pump repairs, we're currently doing 11 repairs on these heat pumps. These heat pumps have been in action for about 8 years or 7 years. Every heat pump in Durham has at least one repair that is needed. Some of them have a couple. Well, one of them has a couple. The Finance Committee approved funding on 9/27 for these repairs using major maintenance and some savings from school contracted transportation savings. In this process, we were able to go to Efficiency Maine and upgrade some of our burners for additional savings. So we changed the burners at Mass Landing School. That cost was $5,638. Efficiency Maine gave us back $3,828. So it only cost us $1,809 for 2 new burners, which ups our efficiency rating by 2%. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but we burn an awful lot of natural gas here. So it adds up in a hurry. And you're going to see that throughout this process. So Moore Street burner, that was the one we were actually going to upgrade, and we did. That cost was $21,206. Efficiency Maine gave us back $10,086, so that only ended up costing us $11,119. So these are all great savings. Freeport Middle School, we found that we could do a quick upgrade. We had new boilers a couple years ago, but we were able to upgrade the burners for $650 after efficiencies, Maine rebates. We'd be nuts not to do it. We did it. We got an extra year of warranty, and we've got 2% savings over the efficiency rating of the boiler. We did a middle school roof over the locker rooms and the offices. That roof was pretty old. It was 32 years old. It was the end of its life cycle. It was ballasted, which means it had a bunch of rocks on it. That's not the best kind of roof. That's not the kind we use anymore. It leaked often, required many repairs. We haven't, in this rain, it's been high and dry in there. So we're in good shape there. Mass Landing School windows, that was completed this summer. Every window in that school was replaced. We replaced them with solid vinyl double glazed windows. We have added energy efficiency. The old windows had 3 materials. They had metal, wood, and vinyl, and that expands at different rates, and that's why those windows fail over time, because they have, in Maine, it's cold and hot, so they get loose, and then water gets in there. This will improve the building envelope, give us more efficiencies, and the old windows, they were just worn out. They wouldn't, half the time, they wouldn't even stay up. So we added a van to the fleet, September. We haven't gotten the van yet. It's on order. We're going to get it next week, hopefully. This is to service students with special needs. The Finance Committee approved funding on 9/27, and we're using the money out of student contracted services account. So buying those 8 buses and hiring those drivers, we actually ended up with quite a lot of savings doing it ourselves. Actually over 3 years, but there's a picture of a van. That's the kind of van I'm getting. They're pretty good on gas. They hold 7 passengers, and we've got enough big ones, so we're good with that. Moore Street doors and locks, we've started that process. One cool thing about the high school is it only has 2 keys now. And a key card, we got the key cards that are up and running for the front doors and some of the outside doors. We eventually will work towards getting the inside doors done. But 2 keys in the event of a code red is like, Mike McManus almost hugged me when we did this, because when you're trying to release the kids from a code red and you can't get into the classroom and they're not going to let you in, because you're fumbling with keys, it's a long process. We've done it several times over the past couple years. So the cool thing about Moore Street is we're going to be down at 2 keys there. And one of those keys, the keys to the outside, one of those keys will be able to unlock, not all of them though, but one of them will be able to unlock the master key, which I will carry, and some of my maintenance people will unlock the high school and Moore Street. So that's one less key. Because you've seen the keys, the bad hips. That's from those keys. So Moore Street, we had the same problem. We had code red. The doors are pretty old. They're worn out, some of them. The hardware doesn't operate well. There's 5 or 6 keys to a small building. It's not, well, not real small. The doors are, you can see there's some wear and tear on the doors. Some of the door handles aren't even, I don't want to go too fast. Some of the door handles, that one is, but some of them aren't even ADA compliant. So we got to get with the program. Moore Street Playground, Julie's team and her, it's all her really. It's all Julie and her team. They did a great job over there. They were really creative with playground stuff, bridges and boats and hills and rocks and all that stuff that the kids like, and it's really, really nice. I struggled to get a picture when there was no kids around because the kids were on it all the time, and I guess that's cool. That's great, It's
And
what it's for. So.
Dennis, can I just add into that the person who's really responsible for this is a parent of one of the kids in first grade, and she's about 8 months pregnant.
Wow.
She's still working on it, 8 months pregnant, and she's just done a bang-up job. It looks terrific.
It's fantastic, and you can tell the kids are always on it. I couldn't get a picture. There's kids on it right now, but I had to stay away because you can't, do that. So it's hard to get a picture of 8 new buses, believe it or not, but there's a pretty good representation of the Durham buses in the afternoon when they're dropping or picking the kids up at school. So 18-19, fiscal year 19, this is what's coming up for the next year. And Naomi and John and Tim and I, we talked and we kind of went towards safety and making sure that the doors operate properly and the kids were informed through, and I'll talk about that a little bit, through the PA systems. So Pownell School doors and locks were going to be upgraded. Moore Street School bathroom, we were going to renovate the whole bathroom, but things got a little bit expensive, so we're going to do the floor this year, and we're going to do a comprehensive upgrade next year. The floor in the bathroom at Moore Street is pretty bad. The kids are not talented in that area. They're not gifted in that area. Phone upgrade, middle school, the phone, if you ever talk on the phone, sometimes it crackles, it's really bad. We've been to the CTI, the phone company, we've been to New England Telephone or whatever it is, Verizon I guess now, or Fairpoint, or, God, you can't ever figure out where you're getting it, but what is that? Yeah, anyway, they can't seem to, no one seems to be able to fix it. It's kind of old, it's worn out. I talked to CTI about it, and they said that most of our phone systems are getting old. So we got to really look at those in the coming years. Durham heat pump replacement, that's the 11 repairs to get. I want to show you a slide on that. I'll talk about that a little later. High school roof replacement in the 300 wing. That's the only wing we didn't do yet. We didn't do it in the renovation process because it's $95,000 and we had so many things to do that we thought we could put it in the capital budget, and this is where it fell in off the 20-year plan. High school phone system, I'm going to talk about that a lot more coming up. And Moore Street PA upgrade, I'm going to talk about that. No capital reserves next year. Going to be a tight year. Pownell doors and locks upgrade. Lisa, we do a code red. She's got her keys. Very hard to unlock the doors sometimes. The handles are worn out. The doors are in pretty good shape. We're going to have to take a look at that. But I've talked with the lock company, and we'll all get together and make out a plan this year. That's non-ADA compliant handle. You can't have those kind of handles anymore. You got to have a level handle. That's a Moore Street bathroom floor. It's especially in the boys' room. The actual fixtures are a little too high for the kids too. It's really not their fault. They're regular sized fixtures. They should have. We'll work on that. Pownell phone system, middle school phone upgrade. That's the one I was talking about. It's at the end of its life cycle. The lines are unclear. Phone company and phone vendors have made many repairs. We can't seem to get a clear line some of the time, a lot of the time. There's a picture of the Durham heat pumps. That's 4 of them. There's 10 of them. We've never had a year that we've had all 10 pumps running for one season or even for a month. That's a screenshot. That's a screenshot of my graphics that show the Durham heat pumps. And if you look, the little red alarm buttons, so those are the 10 heat pumps on any given day. And this is a random day last week. 6 of the 10 heat pumps are in alarm. And they're on the cooling mode, which is actually less, it takes less energy to run them in the cooling mode. When the heating mode comes in, I'm really worried about the others, although we'll have them up and running from the repairs that we're making before the heating season. We've done this several times. Over the past 7 years, we've never had a complete heating season with all 10 pumps running. But in fairness to the company that installed them, over the 7 years, we've stretched our 1-year warranty out for 7 years because we've kept after them. I've kept after them every year, you know. Hey, this is an alarm. You need to look at this. And they've really stood up to it, but it's that you can't trust them. Freeport High School 300 wing, that's the oldest roof in the district right now. That was at the end of its life cycle, 37 years old. It's 1980. Many calls. Didn't get any this week, but today, but we get a lot of them throughout the course of a year. High school phone, the intercom's tied into the phone system. Students can't hear it, can't hear the intercom system when they're in the hallways. And I'll show you why. There's one of the speakers. It's not very much of a speaker, really. It's old and not very effective. The growth limits the phone's effectiveness, so we're losing. The school is getting to be a big school now. We need to upgrade the phone system to meet the needs. And then the safety concern of code red. If the kids can't hear you going into code red, then, you know, they need to hear that so they can get in a lockdown situation if needed. That's the Moore Street PA. And Julie always makes a comment about the movie Grease in there. And I kind of have to agree with her a little bit. She has to do 2 things to get an announcement to the school. In the hallway, she has to get on this rig, and some of the classrooms, and some of the other classrooms, she can do it through the phone. So we're going to try to get that tied together so she can go to one place and make an announcement. So that is 18-19, and now we're looking at fiscal year 2019, 2020. And the next 4 slides are the rest of the capital budget moving forward. But I'll remind you that these become pretty fluid over the course of the year. We prioritize every year based on needs and you know, whatever we come up with it for a priority, like we did this year. So we have 3 more heat pumps, is 10 in all, and I want to replace 3 a year for the next 3 years, and then 1 in the final year, or maybe we'll do 4. We'll see. Mass Landing needs an elevator upgrade. That seals are leaking. It's not dangerous, but it's repaired quite often. Moore Street, we're going to finish the renovations of the bathrooms. Pownell has a request for a main office and nurse remodel. And if you look at the nurse's office, is pretty small here. High school, we want to convert boiler 1 to gas. That's a big Cleaver Brooks. It's 1984 boiler, but it's in great shape, so we're going to try to keep that one. It's they tell me it's the Cadillac of boilers, if there's such a thing. But high school shades, that didn't get done during renovation, but we're going to try to upgrade the shades so they look a lot better. We've done a lot of them, but probably not good commercial shades that we should. And then we had a request for panel cooler and freezer and 2 hot plates, and I should have taken the hot plates off because we're going to do that a different way. We're going to do that through operating budget this year, I think, or maybe some leftover capital, and we're going to replace 1 this year and maybe 1 at the end of the year, and then capital reserves for $20,000. And then 21 Moore Street elevator, those 3 more heat pumps to Durham. Panel heating control upgrade. This building it's a nice building, but it doesn't have a lot of control on the heat. We've added some, and we added the air handlers on the roof in the attic, but we need to do a little bit more. Not a great deal of money, but something that will save us money over time. We're going to remove some asbestos here that's exposed. Asbestos flooring, it's not dangerous. It's the beautiful thing about asbestos is it lasts forever. The bad thing about asbestos is it lasts forever. Then we're going to do panel windows. That'll be an energy efficient building envelope upgrade. And then we have the reserves. And then 21, 22, fiscal year 22. Looking for 2 buses, a maintenance truck, or a van. It'll probably be a van. We use vans now when I have van drivers that do maintenance. High school elevator upgrade, it'll be ready by then according to my 20-year plan, but it may not be. We may push it down. We don't know. We'll assess that in that year or the year before. Fire alarm upgrade, we've done some of that work already. Durham heat pump, that would be the last one, $60,000. Parking lot LED lighting for Durham. We did middle school. I don't know if you guys have been by there, but that's really lit up. That really looks good, and it should last for a long time. Central office carpet, that may or not be done then. It's still in pretty good shape, but we'll see. Panel restroom remodel, that's the restrooms in the main hallway, although we should probably look at these. High school paving the teachers' parking lot, that wasn't part of the project. That came as a surprise to some people.
Aren't they doing it right now?
No, they've done the repairs. They removed the islands, they added curbs, and then they lined it. It wasn't being paved this year.
Oh.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Panel boiler, it'll be ready by then. We've done some repairs on it. We did some repairs, I want to think 2010, but it's going to be ready for a new one right around fiscal year 22. Fiscal year 23 is a big year. Durham parking lot repairs if needed. And this is why it becomes so fluid in the 5-year plan, because I lay it all out in the 20-year plan and grab it from the 20-year plan based on lifespan and capital assets management. And we take good care of our things, so a lot of times we don't have to do them right away. We get more life out of them. Panel steamer, that's a kitchen request. High school auditorium carpet, Mass Landing steam kettle, that's another kitchen request. Middle school windows, rear of school. Mass Landing phone system. Don't know if that's going to need to be done, but based on the lifespan of our equipment, I think we're going to have to look at that. Middle school nurse's office expansion. Well, that was a request by the principal. Middle school replace siding on additions. That's that hardy board siding that's not as hardy as they say. Middle school Mass Landing key card entry. That's just on here. We have key cards in Durham. We have key cards at the high school. Maybe we want to move forward with stuff like that, so we can keep track of who's in our buildings better, and we have easier access, and we can shut cards off as people leave or if they lose them. A security upgrade here because it's on the 20-year plan, and reside the district's portable building. That's the building behind the high school that I use for storage and my maintenance shop. Yeah, Becky's eyebrows just went up. And the capital reserves. And that was changed. This slide was changed in case you're looking at your slide now. I actually went over my whole presentation, and checked all the math, and I had to change the capital reserve line. Thank you. Thank you for supporting us in our facilities goals, and thank you, public. And any questions?
Yes. So I remember a couple of years ago when I went on that wonderful tour as well, and the Durham heat pumps. If they've never worked right for 7 years, what are you going to replace them with?
Well, that's a great question. So, Scarborough just put the new generation pumps in. It's kind of similar to Durham School, and I've been watching Scarborough. I've been talking to them. They haven't had any issues at all for the past year, and then we still have another year to go that we can watch them. They changed the refrigerant, and they've changed the pump significantly. There's a lot of vibration in the ones we have. There's hardly any in the ones they have. I'm supposed to go on a tour here to check it out. It's still the same company that makes it. They realized they had a lot of problems, and we were pretty early in the system in geothermal. I think Westbrook or Gorham beat us, but I think we were like second in schools, and it's not always good to be first in some things or early in the process. But yeah, we have a year we have a year for 2 years of data, and hopefully they'll have a good system that we can copy. And I'm not really satisfied with just paying the price either. I would really like to contact McQuay, and I'm going to, it's part of my plan, to say, I haven't had a satisfaction with these pumps over the past 8 years. What are you going to do to help me change these out? And I think that they should probably do something. I've had experience with that in my old job, so I'm going to try to push them along to help us and get us some pumps at a discount price, so we're not spending $180,000. Maybe we're only spending $100,000. I don't know, but that's my goal.
That would be serious negotiation if you get them to knock it down like 40%.
Something.
Take it to him, Dennis.
You got it. Oh, I forgot to mention Michelle. She did a great job with the electricity. She met with Maine Power Options, and she talked about the savings for the electricity. But I'll give you those numbers. And this is just for the electricity portion, not delivery. We were paying 0.0875 for a kilowatt, and now we're paying 0.0486. So that's half. I'm kind of anxious to see how that's going to play out over the year, but that's good stuff. And okay. Yeah, she did a good job.
Kate?
I thank you.
No? Valley?
I like your attitude, Dennis. Go get them.
It's exciting to save money, isn't it?
Yeah. So I have a question. When you projected all these slides and then you had capital reserve at the bottom, I was wondering if any monies that we're going to start accruing for the eventual replacement of the track were anywhere on the slides. I was scouring and thought, well, maybe capital reserve, but that's really too low to include that.
We actually talked about that this week, Michelle and I. I think Becky started that conversation with Michelle, and Michelle and I and Becky, we work pretty close together. And we're talking about trying to figure out a way to reserve maybe $65,000 a year for the next 12 years. So, have $750,000 to replace the track if we need to, and not have to dip into what? I mean, that's a big number to try to make up in 1 year.
Yeah, so
we'll be ready for it.
So the 65 for the track would be in addition to what you projected there. You wouldn't try to knock something off the list to get the 65 in there.
I don't know about that, but
we're going to have to come up with different options to do the reserve. So, for instance, if these are all projected numbers, estimates, if for some reason, which happened on a couple of occasions this year, if something comes in less, we could potentially use that money to put into capital reserve. So if we're budgeting $400,000 in the capital improvement line, we only spend $350, we could potentially take some of that. Another place that we could take it from is if we have savings throughout the year. So, like for instance, we were able to use $850,000 last year towards the track because we had some savings. So if we have some of that savings again, we could also put that into capital reserves in the following year. So it'll probably be a combination of things that will get us there, but the goal is to come up with a number that we think we need in 12 years. and divide that over 12 years so that we're not having to, put in 10 this year and 45 next year and then 150 the following year. We really want to try and make it a level thing to put in there.
So we are working on that.
Okay, so there will be a line in our budget that will say track and field replacement reserve. It won't be included in the capital reserve or in any of Dennis's plans. It will be its own separate line in the budget.
It will not be a line in the budget. What it will be is an article at the annual budget meeting.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it's not going to be in Articles 1 through 11. It's going to be, just like we put in money into the capital reserve, what we're going to do is put money into a track and field reserve.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would be in favor of having, and it could be that excess from those savings items goes in there, but I would be in favor of, before the year even starts, assuming, not relying on, well, we know we'll save some here and maybe there. I'd rather have a budget. I mean, and maybe it's not the full 100% to get us to the 750 or the million by then, because some of that, but I don't like leaving things up to ambiguity of, hopefully we save enough this year. I mean, I'd like to, maybe some excesses could go and supplement it, but I would want to see anyway. I don't know what the board feels, but.
Yeah, but we have a fairly good idea that there will be savings realized, say, for example, in the electricity savings, then we don't want to necessarily have the 85 taken out of the budget and not being able to fund other things that we may need, and then have an excess at the end.
Yeah, I mean, in theory,
I'm not saying be cavalier and just count on all the savings and not put anything aside, but if we have the possibility of doing that and not
I mean, that's
tying up that money and then cutting other things.
Of the two, right? I mean, we know in prior years we had $40,000 or something we paid on grass fields. That's an easy drop directly into reserves, right? Because we don't have to pay that anymore, and that's not an incremental increase to our budget. That's just a reallocation of it. So.
Yeah. There's a lot of work to be done for that yet, but we are on it. We're on it.
So I guess I would like to point out, currently in our capital reserves, we're at 350,000. Is that correct in that line?
I think capital reserves were at 500. Are you talking about?
No. Well, I'm just wanting to point out that we're budgeting based upon 400,000, but we're not really there yet, right?
That's correct. In the current year, we're at 350.
Right. It's going to be, I'll plug it now, it'll be a little tough cuts this year, but if we have to, we have to.
But I think, you should be commended for things like seeking out the efficiency main stuff, right? I mean, when we see it in our budget in upcoming years, I don't think you assume that you're going to be able to recoup some of that or any of that from
No, we don't
grants.
really, but
but when you
start
can,
asking the right
that's great.
questions and you find out that there's 2% savings. There's a lot of incentives out there if you look for them. So, I mean, we've done it with lighting, we've done it with electricity. She did a great job at that, and
We even bought air conditioning, or washer and dryer, I don't remember which it was, and we applied for a rebate.
it was washers and dryers. Yeah.
Ended up getting $200 rebates.
Yeah. So we're always looking for. We never turn down free money, right?
I appreciate that view on it.
Hey, Michelle.
All right. Anybody
Jim.
else?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, first of all, incredible work getting that discount for the electricity, not supply, right? Not for the
Not
distribution.
supply,
but
SCMP does that.
The power itself, right? Really appreciate that. I would like us to consider, as budget season comes around, finding out what those savings are, and could we look at putting those towards renewable energy, whether it be solar or electric, because we've got so much roof space out there, and the price of solar has come down so much, and there seems to be a lot of support in the community for solar with the Solarized Freeport thing from a couple years ago. So love to
Now
see
we
that
have
there.
grass, fake grass on our roof at the high school.
Right, it's a cool thing.
Just in case you guys want to know, but if you think about the grass, it over time, the sun, the effect of the sun, it lessens the color. So in order to do repairs, we have grass, we have leftover grass, or leftover turf, I should say, not grass. So we put it out, and we laid it out on the roof, so if we ever have to make a repair, it'll match.
Ah. Huh.
A lot of schools do that. That wasn't our idea, but we took that, and while they were there, they put it up there for us.
All right, we're going to have to check that out on the drone photos.
I don't think it's laid out yet.
Yes,
It's just
not
up
the
there.
sidewalk. We will not be going on the roof.
All right. Anything else?
Kate, I see your hair almost going up.
I was just wondering if you could restate what you said about the 350,000. Were you talking about the capital improvements line or the capital reserves?
Improvement.
Capital improvement.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
I don't know. I gotta find my paper. Here we go. Unfinished business. Okay, none. New business. None. Board comments. Reports from subcommittees. Finance. Kate.
Okay. Most of this has been covered already with Michelle and Dennis's presentations. And I was not at this meeting, so I'll probably mostly just read from the paper here. This was the September 28th, 2017 meeting. John, Michelle, the two Michelles, and John were in attendance, as well as Dennis and Dr. Foley. The first item that was covered was the purchase of the van, and as previously stated, the replacement van was purchased. It's been purchased. It's been ordered with $25,000 using the BOMAR savings, and that was needed because there are a number of children needing transportation, and the fact that 2 vans had to be taken off the road because they did not pass inspection. And boiler number 1 at Moore Street School was leaking, so that was $21,000. $2,100 of that came from the repairs and maintenance account, and the rest from the BOMAR savings. And then all 10 heat pumps at Durham Community School are in need of repairs. $12,000 for those repairs. $6,400 of that is coming from the repairs and maintenance account, and the rest from the BOMAR savings. And that was unanimously approved to purchase and make those repairs on those items. Also at this meeting, the Finance Committee approved use of the capital reserves funds for the track and field. So last year, if you recall, we set aside some money from our savings, put them into the capital reserve fund to go towards the track and field. So what needed to be done here was to move that money from the reserves account into the track and field project. So the amount that was approved was $531,131. And let's see if there's any more information that really needs to be said here. I don't think so. The committee unanimously approved the use of those funds for the track and field payments. And then the other item was the Moore Street School playground. Last year, in this year's school budget, we have set aside $10,000 for the Moore Street School. And they had used up that money and needed an additional $3,000 to complete the playground. They also had quite a bit of fundraising money that went towards that project. So John had made a motion to approve up to $5,000 to be spent on finishing the playground, and Michelle R. seconded, and the committee approved that money for the project completion. The last meeting was October 12th. And we were all in attendance at that meeting. This is where Michelle L. covered the electricity contract renewal and her news that she reduced the kilowatt hour rate down to the 0.048 cents for the next 4 years. And as Dennis mentioned, that's about a 50% savings in the electricity supply. Let's see. There's some other items here about how Michelle, L, and Dennis, they're going to be monitoring the buildings during peak hours and days in the summer when the buildings could go over peak capacity, because that'll potentially increase the rate for the following year if you're using electricity during those peak hours. We also did approval of the recruiting software that Michelle L. mentioned earlier. She requested the purchase of this recruiting software because it would help reduce the current labor-intensive process currently in place in the business office. She mentioned earlier that they processed 780 applications manually in the last hiring season, and this means that they get an application in, they make a copy of it, they personally email each applicant individually to request any pieces that are missing from the application. They email each person who is not chosen for an interview. Then they print, scan, and put into a Google Docs, and then they share each application with the hiring administrators. And so what she brought to us was a program that'll handle all those applications digitally. So right now you see a posting for RSU5, you go on, you manually submit the application, or can you email it too? I don't know if you email it. You can email it too. But what this will do is anywhere where we want to post a job, it'll just have the link to the program, to the company that handles all of this, and it'll go to an electronic version, and they can do everything basically online, and then it's sent in automatically, and then all of the documents are organized electronically. You can click the box next to who you don't want to interview this time around. They are missing pieces of their application, and it sends out automatic notification of that. So the cost of the software is only $3,600. So we thought that that was probably money well spent. That's for the first year, and it includes the installation and training, and then for each following year it's $2,550. And that was approved unanimously by the Finance Committee. And we also at that meeting approved our calendar for the upcoming year of what we're going to cover in our meetings. And after review of the calendar, we did add an item, and I can't remember what the item was now, and I think I was the one who asked to put something on there. Do you remember what it was?
Well, fraud was the one that I had brought up, the fraud risk assessment.
Maybe insurance was the other one, I can't remember. Okay. Okay, that was it. Our next meeting is November 8th, 2017 at the central office. November 8th, the auditor will be at that meeting.
It's a very exciting meeting for anyone who wants to join, anyone who hasn't met our auditor.
And that is big news because this is earlier than we've ever done that.
Right. This is to keep us on track for actually filing by 12/31, which is when we're supposed to file. And we have never, ever made that deadline before. So kudos to Michelle and her team for getting all the information to the auditors to keep them on track. So. Okay, so next is strategic communications. Without Candy, is somebody gonna?
I can do a really quick one.
Okay.
The first meeting that's listed on your yellow page was the one where I wasn't even there, but they discussed the budget. No, they discussed the marketing brochure. Yeah. So a few things were planned, and a draft is being worked on. And the second meeting, we looked at the budget brochure that Becky put together last year, and we made some revisions to it for this coming year.
So just a quick comment on the budget the budget brochure. I'd gotten an email from another board chair from a town down in the southern part of the state who's working on their transparency, on their budget process with their community members. And they said, we have heard great things about your brochure that you send out. Could you send us a copy so we could look at it? So there we go. Trendsetters, that's what we are. Policy Subcommittee, Naomi.
So since we're going to talk about, we're going to review policies tonight, I'm not going to nitpick and read through all these, but we had a meeting on September 22nd and October 13th where we reviewed policies. And so tonight we're going to be doing first reads for staff conduct with students, and then recruiting and hiring of administrative staff, which we had to change because there was language in the law that changed, so required us to change it. And as Becky mentioned, we're tabling the community use of school facilities. And then we're bringing back for second read tonight the use of private vehicles on school business. Business. And then we have one that we are rescinding, that we're asking to rescind, which was request permission to administer medication in school. I think we decided that's more, it's a form, so it's not really a policy. And then there's a list on your pink sheet of all the policies that were reviewed that no changes were made, so no board action is required. And our next meeting is November 3rd at Central Office.
Okay. You going to run us through the policies?
Yes. May I ask a question first of the board chair? So I updated the gate information if I did not include the students who didn't test, so I could provide that. And if you want it now or later, how would you like to proceed?
You have it now?
I have it now.
Might as well put it on our papers.
Okay.
Ready.
So if you pull out that, I don't know what page is. I think it's slide 10.
Yeah, it's the extra sheet.
Okay,
Because you had
very
an SAT,
good.
yep.
So we'll start with the 4-5 ELA. There was one student who did not take the test. So if I do the recalculation and not include that student, it goes from 48 to 52% for NWEA. And then if you go to the 9-10 math, it is 78%.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, it is a big difference. Yeah. So those are the students who actually took the test. And then if you go to the ELA, it's 50%. And then I do have two other calculations for the MEA, because there was a student who didn't take the MEA in a particular grade in the 4-5. So the 4-5 math for MEA would be 100%. And the 4-5 ELA is 85%.
Okay. ELA. 85.
One student was out of town.
Okay. Thank you. Well, when there's only, I mean, when you look at how many there are, there's not that many, right?
Exactly. One person changes the percent by 6% on, yeah. So, yes. So I thought that would be nice to have before you left.
Thank you for that follow-up. That speedy follow-up. I
Right
love it.
in the moment. Well, I had all these charts and calculations already, so I just pulled it up. Okay. So policies. So GBEBB. Let me get my page here. Is staff conduct with students, and the change is really on letter K. And we've added language to clarify what it means to be alone with individual students. And so we had lots of discussion, and the new language would read, be alone with individual students out of the public view of others without a specific educational purpose, because there are times when a guidance counselor, for example, may need to have some privacy and not want to be in the view. Could be a discipline issue with the principal or administrator, having conversation and interviewing students. So this is meant to clarify the intent of the policy. Any other questions on that one?
In N, where you list the ways in which a student outside of school may be contacted, or actually may not be contacted.
Correct.
Does phone include text message, or should we say phone, text, email, instant messenger? Because text is one of the ways that it would be inappropriate for a staff member to contact a student.
We could add that. The board wishes.
Since, yeah.
And
Pretty
then,
sure kids don't even use their phones as a phone anymore. It's purely a texting module.
yeah. And then I wanted to just throw it out there, but based on what we have learned recently about not good use or not good conduct, wanted to see if we could add something that's along the lines of letter Q would be sharing sensitive information about students. So that no staff, coach, teacher should be sharing sensitive information about students.
About other students, right.
So like the FERPA law.
Right.
But doesn't that get covered in H?
Disclosing personal. That's more, well,
No, because this is.
I read that to be about themselves.
Right,
Like, they
this is
shouldn't be
disclosing
talking
their
about
own
themselves,
information.
too.
But what I'm referring to is when they know something about a student that is sensitive and they disclose it to their friend or their coworker or somebody else.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's not anywhere else in our policies and procedures.
It's in FERPA law.
Yeah.
So, and we all have to adhere to the FERPA law, but if okay. So how would you like the language? Do you want to suggest language?
Sharing sensitive information about students?
With another student, right?
No, it could be with another adult. So it could be with anyone who shouldn't have access to that information.
Well, because there's going to be some staff, I mean, I'm sure there's some of that goes on between guidance and others.
Right,
So you have
we
to,
define a little better
Right.
who would not qualify to
My
receive
only
information.
comment on that would be that this is for staff conduct with students.
Right.
And so I don't know if this is the correct.
Right, this might not be the policy
place.
for
Yes.
staff-to-staff discussion.
So it is covered,
in FERPA.
right,
It is?
through FERPA.
Okay.
Yes.
Then, no need to say
But
that.
I'm not against maybe adding something about sharing it with students.
Jen?
I was thinking after, Becky, I read your report to teachers, and it did specifically talk about the social networking and things like that. Is there any room for teachers to have like a teacher Facebook page? Only because I feel like we're going in that direction and we have to kind of address it. I can think of a teacher, that has a Facebook page that I know a lot of students are friends, I guess, with her, and it's very professional. I mean, I don't know if, I'm just trying to think about being kind of like.
So I think that's addressed in where it says
Right.
beyond homework or other legitimate school business. So I think we have on an upcoming B team meeting to discuss, how can we better communicate in a way that parents want, community members want, and we are going that way. So this is really talking about inappropriate use. right? So this is talking about allowing students to friend you on a personal Facebook page. So that's what we're trying to cover here.
So the expectation is that they would have to, and then
They would
that's
have
not
the two
uncommon, right?
separate.
Like I know
Right.
realtors who have like their personal page, but then they have
Right.
their professional page, right? So
Right.
it could be a professional page.
So is that something that's going to get kind of spelled out to teachers? Because I just feel like this can put teachers in a position where they're doing something that they don't realize is even not okay, I guess. I mean, I'm just thinking.
I do, you know, this is one of the policies that they all sign off on that they've read, but I do think that we have had discussions recently that says we need to talk about this more and explain it more, because I think there is some confusion out there.
Oh, it just happens so fast, like the whole social
Yes.
networking thing. It just is so fast. So.
I had one more thing that I just wanted to ask the group if they felt it was appropriate to include in here, but leading students in inappropriate, I don't know, activities or drills, should that be included here?
Civic volley?
I don't think I should. Maybe Becky can do it in a very sensitive way.
So I think we always want to try to keep our policies, again, broad. And in that specific instance that I think you're referring to, I think that is covered through our hazing policy.
So it is covered, but
Well,
it would.
yes, I think it, I do think it
maybe
is.
harassment is.
Is it we cover harassment, not just sexual harassment, but harassment, and that might be that broad umbrella that might fall under, and that's in there on letter A, so.
Yeah, maybe I should read that policy.
And,
see if it covers it.
and also read closely your hazing policy, and I think it's covered there.
Okay.
I should say our hazing policy.
I think that what Naomi was saying is A, in the policy we're looking at, talks about sexual or inappropriate physical contact with students or any other conduct that might be considered harassment under the board's policy on harassment and sexual harassment of students. And I
Probably
don't know the
picks up what you're talking-
specifics of what you're talking about, but was wondering if maybe that hits on it.
Well, and I also think if you look at C, you know, things can fall under that as well, associating with students in any situation, drugs, alcohol, tobacco, or sexually suggestive. I mean, that can also be something that it could fall under.
Sarah.
Maybe this is covered elsewhere, but I'm wondering if unacceptable conduct is also discrimination, you know, based on gender, sexual orientation, anything like that.
That's your harassment.
That's just harassment. So is that spelled out real? Because harassment just sounds, especially when you've got harassment and sexual harassment, it sounds like it's all kind of sexual harassment.
Well, I think they're two separate policies, so they're referring to there's the harassment policy and the sexual
Okay.
harassment policy.
All right, so that's just a policy, and they get fully schooled on that. Okay, great.
Any other questions on this one? Jeremy.
Kind of have a general comment, maybe it's for Cynthia, but I struggled reading through this like with letter H, like discussing personal, sexual, family, employment concerns. And I was trying to think like, you know, being a teacher, you know, connecting with their students in the classroom.
Right.
Wouldn't, you know, personal is such a extremely broad topic. I just wonder if we're, you know, that's such a broad topic. How do we ever enforce that? How would it ever be known that, you know, like
Where's the
somebody
line?
talking about my husband went and mowed the lawn. Oop, you
Yeah.
talked about something personal. That it's like,
So
yeah, it's.
I think examples of it, I understand what you're
So-
saying, and I think like I think that if you think of it, if you think about boundaries and, you know, I'm having financial problems and then you're sharing your woes with your students, that would be not appropriate. Whereas, you know, your husband mowing the lawn is just conversation that you're having. And I think there's, you know, with every policy, you know, you're looking at the language and the intent and all of the, you know, so I don't think anybody would pass the straight face test if they said, oh, you talked about mowing the lawn, you know, and that's a great example. So when reviewing these, if you were going to be discussing something like that with a teacher, I can't think of any administrator who would, you know, pull somebody in for that. We all talk about our lives, right? Because that's how you connect. So I would agree with you. I think it's more, you know, you might even say, I'm going through a divorce, but are you going to say, oh, we're in a big custody battle and, you know, he came and stormed in. So that's the difference. I think that's some judgment involved in that.
So it's understood that inappropriate is baked in there, if you will.
Beyond the scope of what, you know.
I mean, we try to keep our stuff not super specific, but that's almost overly vague, I think. I agree that it almost seems, you know, if you're reading this, like these other ones are pretty specific and you're like, you can talk about nothing about your family or your personal life. I mean, even if you put in something like a word like inappropriate, I think that, I don't know.
Would that feel better?
I think it would.
So put after disclosing inappropriate?
Right, so unacceptable conduct is disclosing personal information or anything about your family. Is that really what we mean to say? Or do we mean to say inappropriate? Right, it is, right. But at least it makes it a little more identified.
So if I insert inappropriate between disclosing and personal, that would, okay.
Right. Right, I mean, obviously sexual is just assumed that it's inappropriate. Kate.
Does personal matters, like, maybe say something different than just leaving it as personal? Or if you say disclosing personal matters, does that mean anything different? I'm just wondering if that's something you could put.
What about personal troubles? I mean, like, what are we really talking about?
What if it's not bad?
It's okay to say I'm getting married.
Yes.
Except you mentioned it's probably okay to be like, I'm getting divorced. But you don't want to go into specifics. So it's like, is it personal troubles that we're talking about?
No, because it could be
It could go either way.
Well, I think there's situations where teachers can talk about themselves all day long to the students, and it might not be inappropriate, but it's not the place or the time. It's not about you, the teacher. Exactly. So I don't think it necessarily even has to be inappropriate if they're talking too much about themselves to students, and students come home and that's what they talk about in that class is what their teacher's personal life is like, then we've gone off track somewhere. And then I think that's where it just personal.
I think I might suggest taking out concerns after employment and just making it disclosing inappropriate personal, sexual, family, employment, or other private matters. So it really is inferring matters after each one to one or more students. And I mean, obviously we trust our teachers every day to know when they're crossing a boundary or not. And there are times when they're not using good judgment, and we need to support them in understanding that more fully.
Okay.
Dr. Foley, did you just suggest taking out the word employment?
No, just concerns.
Concerns.
Okay.
So adding inappropriate,
So that
taking out
matters
concerns.
goes with all of them.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to the next one. I think Naomi had stated that this change is just a reflection of the law, the language of the law. So you can see down below the legal reference that's taken out, the one that's added, and that paragraph that's underlined. is reflective of the law. The one that's taken out is reflective of the old. So it's pretty straightforward.
Last paragraph, in accordance with 20A MRSA, and you keep going.
Yes.
This units was replaced by RSU 5s, but the unit is still there. So do we really want to say the RSU 5s? Okay.
Correct.
And then if you go down one line, you still have the units and has not been replaced by RSU 5s, non-discriminatory administrator hiring practice. Right, delete the and delete units and replace with RSU 5s.
Good catch, thank you.
And then the third line, you basically took out the last piece of the sentence where it says, and the relationship of the above to the states. So now you need to insert the and before plans for in-service training, because that is the last piece of your sentence.
Thank you. Must have been the last thing we did that day.
Valley's on a grammar roll over there.
Thank you very much. Yes. Hopefully you've read through the next one, and Dave Watts will be at our the next time we have policy too, because he has the history behind all of that. So I think we need a motion.
Cynthia, before we do the next one with David, would it be possible to have the rate sheet that is referred to here?
Yes.
Included, so that when we review, we know what we're.
It's on the website, and we can have it printed out. Is that what you'd like? Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
That's it for the first reads. Oh, I'm sorry. Could you tell me who motioned it? Naomi. Thank you. Thank you. I have to do the minutes at the same time, so I apologize. Okay, and then I'm going to write that note to bring the rates chart. Okay. So the next one we already talked about, and we had Craig here last time, and so so there's no changes to that one.
I don't like how we say RSU number 5 sometimes and then RSU 5 others.
Oh, we can fix that.
We should probably be consistent. So the one we just changed, the recruiting one, we say RSU 5s, and in this one we say RSU NO period 5. We should probably be consistent through our policies, and I think the RSU NO
is the one that we
is
used.
The right one, despite me not liking that one.
Ginny says they're both correct, but we've been doing them consistently since you've asked, and I think it's the number 5, like you've said.
I think that's our legal name.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
This one's good, right? Yes. I think this is the one we want.
Can I make some comments on this?
Yeah.
The first line, where it says some school employees to use their own privately owned motor vehicles. Can we just say to use privately owned motor vehicles? No, it says their own privately owned motor vehicles.
Own is crossed out.
But
to use their privately owned. Oh, you just want to say to use privately owned.
But there is still there.
Oh,
yeah.
the there is still
so
there.
Strike the there too.
To use privately owned.
I think the there clarifies it's the there.
Well, there.
Their vehicle and not just any privately owned vehicle. Right? Because they have to have their insurance on their car.
Okay, so it doesn't
So they
apply.
can't be using your, even though your car is a privately owned.
Okay, okay.
Does that make sense now?
Yeah.
It's very important there.
Yeah. So is that the case too for B, where it says no student may be sent on school errands with her own vehicle, instead of saying with a private vehicle? I mean, we're talking about private vehicles here, be their own or be the employees or be anybody's, right? As long as it's not a school-owned vehicle.
It's interesting because that one almost looks like they could take your car. They can't take their car. They can't take a teacher's car, and they can't take a school car, but they could take your car.
Right. It does look like that. I don't know.
Is this one where we have to change it around and say it needs to be owned by this? Are we trying to say it's, no, we're trying to say it's not school-owned.
Yeah, what vehicle can a student use to do errands?
Shouldn't
Maybe
we
they
just say they
do
can't
errands.
do school errands?
Unless it's with Valley's car.
They can use a bicycle. I don't know, Cynthia, did the committee discuss that?
No.
So are we just trying to say that they shouldn't go out on errands on a privately owned vehicle? Then we can just say that instead of specifying his or her own or the employees or whoever else may own the vehicle.
But a school-owned vehicle is not.
Or school-owned vehicle, too.
So we should say in
They
any
can run
vehicles.
errands, just they have to run. That's kind of what it sounds like.
We're not talking about.
What, are we really sending people on school errands? I mean, they can leave campus, right?
Get pencils and CDs. I mean, they can leave campus because they have permission to go eat lunch when they're.
But that's not a school.
Errand.
If they go to pick up stuff for a class that their teacher says they'll reimburse them for, is that a school errand?
Yeah, they're not supposed to be, they're not errands.
But it kind of sounds like they're doing it.
We wouldn't allow that.
I'm in agreement. Students should not be sent on school errands.
I think that's
whether they're driving, biking,
Code of
or
conduct, right?
That's in the code
driving.
that was one of the things in the code of conduct, is that they're not supposed to be sent on errands, right? Well, personal errand, I mean, I don't know.
You can't send them to pick up your dry cleaning.
Okay, so I'm going to be I don't know, I mean, I think the policy committee needs to look into that maybe.
Yeah.
How did we not pick
What
that
they
up last
intend.
time?
But I will say that I would hate to say that they can't be sent on any school errands because sometimes with our life skills students, with different groups, that they may be doing what I call jobs that are benefiting the school. That would be considered an errand. So I've had, like in elementary schools, I can think of times when we had life skilled kids deliver notices to each classroom. And that could be considered an errand, but it was part of their programming.
And they drove there?
No.
We're teaching them how to drive.
So can we say they shouldn't be sent on errands unless it's part of school programming? Because for any
part
other
of an
children,
educational purpose
Without
or something.
educational purpose.
But I'm
Right.
thinking maybe the policy committee may want to research this a little bit and come back with a recommendation.
Right. Like what the goal is. Well, that's what I'm saying. How did we not pick that up the first time?
Someone was slacking.
Well, this is a private vehicle policy. This is an errands policy.
Well, in all honesty, Becky, when you say that about the students doing that, how do they do it? Because in this policy, they can't go in their own vehicle, they can't go in an employee's vehicle, and
They can't go in a school vehicle.
Right. So no. Yeah.
To Moore Street.
Correct, or within their own school. So that's why I was just reacting to someone suggesting taking all the vehicle piece out and saying no school errands.
I don't think we
Right.
should say no school errands, but I don't know that this needs to be in here when this is talking about vehicles.
Right, if they don't take them on vehicles
If
anyway.
vehicles aren't involved in the school errands that they're
Right.
doing for educational purposes, then why do we even have it in a policy about vehicles?
I don't know.
So maybe we just address it elsewhere. I don't know.
Is it the will of the board to strike that letter B?
See?
C?
Wait, C?
B,
B?
it's B.
No, I'm like, what?
Okay.
Well, I think if you strike B, then there's the potential that a student will do that.
Okay.
But I'm just not sure what it's getting to.
So why don't we just say they can drive on errands rather than just say the owner's vehicle or the teacher's vehicle or the school vehicle? No vehicles.
Not do errands with any vehicle.
But I think the interesting thing when you talked about the life skills is they do take some of those high school kids out to do that type of stuff, right?
But is that considered errands?
Oh, okay, so that's probably
Or
not
is it part of
errands.
their programming?
Okay.
I wonder if that's...
Right. But it doesn't say they're driving.
No, it doesn't.
Right.
But it's inferred, isn't it?
No students can drive on school errands. No, wait. No, isn't there another, I didn't hear about, like, students can't drive on school. When can students drive to school?
Like they can go to practice at Hunter Road Fields, they can drive themselves there.
Yeah.
Only if that's allowed with their licensing, though, right? That's right. You can't have any kids for a year or something in the car.
Right, unless they duck. Oh, whoops, no, they can't.
Right.
They can't.
I think I would recommend that the policy committee do more research. I mean, I'm sure this is a policy suggested by MSMA and that they could give us some guidance to what other districts have grappled with.
Right.
That
There's
has
obviously
resulted.
a lawsuit around
Right,
this.
right.
And they needed a rule around it, so let's figure out what we really want to say.
Okay, any other issues with the policy before I go back to policy?
Valley.
One more?
Let's see, D, where you talk about the students making trips in private vehicles. It says the owners must be properly licensed, but shouldn't we say the drivers must be properly licensed? Because the driver may not necessarily be the owner of the car. And then the owners should carry a minimum liability insurance, because then they do own the car and they do need to carry the liability.
Actually, insurance follows the person, not the driver. I mean, not the car. So I'm insured by my policy, my whole policy, even if I'm driving somebody else's car. So really, it should be the driver. I think so. Right.
But if somebody else is driving your car, the car is insured.
No, the
Not-
person is insured.
They have to use their insurance.
Their insurance would cover them.
But sorry.
But that's actually a good point. So if I don't have a car and I don't have insurance, but I drive your car because I have a license, I don't know. Sounds like an insurance question. I said, like, if I have my license, right, I'm a licensed driver, but I don't own a car, so I don't have car insurance because I don't
Then
own a
it
car.
goes on the owner
Then it goes-
of the car.
Right, so somebody's got it.
There's a default for that.
So you want to make sure one or the other is insured, I guess.
A little bit.
Michelle? Just, on D, though, it does, the owners must be properly licensed. I think that's what Valley's saying too, right? The driver must be properly licensed.
Right, that's true. Particularly if these are kids' cars, like, in all likelihood, the owner is the parent, not the kid.
So maybe it's the vehicle needs to
Must be
carry
insured.
liability
Right.
insurance? Like,
When is a student going on a trip in a private jet?
To practice. Like, yeah, like Junior Achievement Titan Challenge, they send kids. Well, I don't know
So
if
we're
Freeport
saying
does.
that the driver must be properly licensed, and then either the driver or the owner must carry a liability insurance.
I think so.
Not to nitpick, but
I think this policy is written, if you go back to the first paragraph, that it really is addressing when the school employee has to use their own car. So I think that the owner is the driver.
Oh, because it's right, this isn't kids.
Right.
Except for B.
Right. B has nothing to do with employees using their own privately owned vehicles. It's about students driving.
And now that's why we want more research on that, because I'm really questioning how it fits into this policy.
Does that mean that we have to come up with another policy for student drivers?
Do we have another policy?
Because if this is only for staff, then...
Yeah, H is students as well.
So I can look at that. I don't think we have any other policy for students. But I'm wondering when students would be sent on an errand in there. I'm going back to when would students be sent on an errand?
And just so you know, H has RSU 5, not RSU number 5. So within the same policy, we have it both ways.
I know when we discussed this, though, we discussed it from the viewpoint of staff and students, because there was a lot of discussion about practices and things like that. So maybe we add students to the first paragraph.
Right. And then you can pick them both up.
Right. Okay.
But this does say that they can't go on field trips.
Right.
Or out of district stuff. So basically you can go to Hunter Road Field for practice.
Right.
Or Pownell Road Field.
Could I circle back to a comment I made last time about I and how parents are informed when private vehicles are used to transport their children? I would suggest that we say parents will be informed whenever private vehicles will be used to transport their children for a field trip or other school purposes that are out of district or in district, including sports. And they will be required to sign a permission form in advance for field trips and out of district, so that we allow the information to be given to parents when they are driven, but they're not required to sign any paperwork.
Unless they're going out of district.
Unless they're going out of district.
Well, we sign paperwork in the beginning of the year for in-district field trips.
Yeah, but that's just field trips. That's not specifically going in private vehicles. That's more like you can go to the
But you
FPAC to
have
see something
But
on
I
a
think
bus.
you do have to give permission in district if it's in a.
No, Jen said the other day when she was here that sometimes the Region 10 students miss the bus and that someone will drive them there.
Right. I know that I've had, when my son was here, he got transported to Durham like once a week, and I had to give permission for the staff member to privately transport him in her vehicle. So
maybe it's
We're just
case
not-
by case, it's not consistent.
It's not being consistent.
Yeah, because I have personal experience with my son taking a class in the high school when he was at the middle school and missing the bus or getting off the bus in the wrong school, and then it was great that someone would just drive him there. So I'm not complaining about that part. But some parents may not want their kids to be driven around without knowing who's driving them. So just quick phone call saying, hey, by the way, your kid missed the bus. I'm driving him to the other school, without needing to sign anything, because it could just be a quick phone call. But
So information in both cases, signing for out of district.
So I guess I would want it worded in a way, Cynthia, that gives us leeway in emergency situations, because I can imagine a time when you might be out of district somewhere and the need arises to transport the kid in a vehicle. And I can think of, usually it's around some kind of discipline issue. So you're at a field trip and the kid's misbehaving and the decision has been made, okay, we're not going to put the kid on the bus, right? And we're in Boston, right? So we're out of district, but I want to be able to just call the parent and say this is the situation and not have to think about getting somewhere where I have to have a signed form.
Right, because the way I is written now, you do need a signed form.
I know.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if we can think of some language that gives us the flexibility in emergency situations or something like that.
I don't know if this is practical, but since we're asking for signatures for field trips out of district, is there something we could make standard in our permission slip that if the child or the student is misbehaving on the trip, that you have permission to drive them home? Yeah.
Well,
yes.
not misbehaving, but yeah, or if there's a reason why.
You know, kids are at Camp Kiev and all of a sudden they get homesick and, you know, Ray's driving back anyway and I'll just bring the kid back and meet the parent. I mean, I just can think of a lot of situations where we want to meet the needs of the kids, right, and not be restricted by the policy.
So do we need to have written permission? Do we just say information to parents will suffice rather than have this other part to the sentence that says that they need to have written permission for out of district? Maybe we just give verbal permission for in and out of district.
I think there's liability maybe if it's out of district, out of state. It might be, I mean, that's why we always, you know, have signed permission forms. I imagine there's something like that. But we should, yeah. Let's redo this policy. Let's start from the beginning.
Sounds like we have a work cut out for us. This will be on the agenda that comes up tomorrow.
Can I make one last comment before you get to work on it tomorrow morning? This is for the section on privately owned vehicles, the third paragraph. Same as what I said last time, the fact that here we're only talking about parents transporting, or that the school is not responsible for anything that happens from a parents transporting his or her own children. Can we add, comma, or any other children, comma, to or from a school-sponsored event or activity? Because we're not concerned only about the driver's own children and liability for them. We're concerned about liability for any other children who are students in the school being transported by a parent.
And is there some way to check too that we can legally do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can write whatever you want in your policy, and it will not stand up in court. For, you know, just no. There's a policy. It's on a pink sheet.
And we voted it.
No, we've washed our hands of all liability. Thanks for asking, though. Okay.
Okay. That's okay. We want to get it right.
So we are tabling that one? Yeah? We don't need to vote on it? Yeah, we're not voting on it. That's my point, right? Okay. And then the one you're rescinding?
Correct. That's, as Naomi mentioned, that's a form, and actually, and it doesn't need to be a policy. And actually, in practice, they're using something different. So it has these elements on it, but there's more, and it should be. It's like the KF-R, not KF, KFB, I think it is. It's the Title I policy where the procedures.
Like none of us will know. You just make one up.
Yeah, I'll just make one up. No, it's the title policies. I'll just say that. It starts with a K. So the two supporting documents were supposed to be alive and fluid, and it's no different than a form. And they make changes based on recommendations from the state. So if we could have a motion to rescind.
So we need a motion to rescind. Naomi, second. Vali, any other questions? All those in favor? Not opposed. Thank you. Okay. Maddie, public comment.
Just because I feel so involved in the conversation and I can't speak. And
it's hard, isn't it?
And I know you can't really talk back to me, but just a couple things. to maybe a note, if it's relevant, if it's not, just disregard. So in the policy on recruiting, there's no mention of sexual orientation, just gender and national origin and all of that. So I don't know if that needs to be put in there, or if maybe it's not in the law. But that might be worth looking into. And then the one on staffing and discrimination in staffing.
So there's a RSU 5 in the first paragraph. Affirms its commitment to the strict prohibition of discrimination in employment on the basis of race, national origin, religion, sex, age, or disability, and to the principle of affirmative action.
And I would add sexual orientation.
What's that? So is that pulled directly from the law?
This has been through general wisdom, so I can check on that.
Okay.
Why not go above and beyond is my feeling on that. But and then with regard to drivers, high school students driving their own cars, I just wanted to make a note when you're looking into that, maybe to talk to Dee Dee and to Craig, because I know of many instances where athletes are going to other schools, or drama club are going to other schools, RSVP club, Interact club. There's all kinds of programmatic things happening between schools where there's not a lot of time. And I know for sure, at least when my son was in the high school, there was a lot of students driving between schools. So it might be worth it to look into that. It would be a bummer to write a policy that all of a sudden they couldn't do that, when there are a lot of good reasons why you would want them to.
Students are actively discouraged from driving their own vehicles to meets. So they're not allowed to compete in the meet if they do drive themselves.
Yes,
they can do it to practice, but not to meets.
Yeah, I'm thinking specifically of during their lunch times, track athletes had gone to lunches at the other district schools to hype involvement in races. So it was fundraising and team recruiting, but also during their lunch times.
When they're allowed to leave.
Yeah, I think Craig was with us.
Yeah, Craig was right
Yeah.
the
And
last
talk-
time we talked
yeah.
about it, and he talked about.
But
But I mean, the Dee Dee is a good one
Yeah.
too, given the sort of
Because she'll know
community
all
stuff.
the RSVP, Interact, all, because there's lots of times when the older students are going down, and it's great mentoring, and you want that kind of thing, but you don't want to prohibit it with a blanket policy. Just my 2 cents, thanks.
All right. So I'm only taking the motion to adjourn from one person tonight.
Me!
Thank you. Second from Naomi. If we don't vote to adjourn, she can't get off the board. Then we have to stay. All right, that's true. You're on the board for 2 more weeks. All those in favor?
Be at another meeting. Me!
Thank you.